Racing games come in all shapes and sizes, made to cater towards whichever niche they're aiming for. This gets a bit muddled when manufacturers were trying new ideas with controls and gimmicks back in the 90s and 2000s era of console gaming. Several big franchises that would normally be known for their release in the main consoles would dip their toes as well, alongside several developers that would try out their luck with this new market space. As a result, a bunch of games with wildly fluctuating quality ended up filling the platform, some utilizing the hardware limitation and gimmick in different ways. For now, however, I've chosen the PSP as my first target of analysis. It was the portable console by Sony, made during the transitional period between the PlayStation 2 and 3, where they started to push online connectivity as an additional feature. Unfortunately, however, being a portable console meant that it had to limit its size for comfort and convenience, resulting in significantly less hardware prowess and reduction in usable buttons. And this possesses the first line of challenge for any developers looking into the platform. How would they develop their games around this limitation? What sacrifices will they make to adapt? And that's what we're looking into today. A look into every PSP racing game that I could find. So buckle up, get some drinks, and probably something more than just snacks, because this is going to be a long one. We're starting off with a weird one, but also kind of nostalgic. How many of you remember the Asphalt franchise? Some of you probably know it from the more recent releases, which, let's be honest, have had some questionable qualities. But the Asphalt we're talking about here is the PSP port of the second game, the only entry in the series that ever made it to Sony's handheld. This version doesn't stray far from what you'd expect if you've played it on old mobile phones. The gameplay leans heavily on designs borrowed from Burnout and Need for Speed. Just don't expect the same level of polish, because the implementation here is, well, let's just say limited. The takedown mechanic feels janky, the wanted system is odd, and how the game handles boosting can be rather interesting in concept but shallow in execution. The whole loop revolves around evolution mode, where you climb through leagues and cups with restrictions of what cars you can use. Sometimes you'll need to buy new vehicles, upgrade them for better performance, or if you want to, slap on some cosmetic changes for free. Body kits and liveries though cost a hefty chunk of cash, and honestly, they don't feel worth it. The core mechanic in racing is boosting. The game even dedicates 3 buttons to it if you missed it, letting you stack up to a triple boost. In that state, any contact with rivals or cops instantly counts as a takedown. So yeah, collecting boost pickups seems crucial. More takedowns means more money, but they also crank up your wanted meter, eventually triggering a helicopter sniper. It's really jank though. Dodging it requires either braking or triple boosting until an invisible timer runs out. Or if you want to cheese it, just stay in first place without ever touching boost, and suddenly the whole wanted system becomes irrelevant. It's easy to pick up, but that can also become a double-edged sword. After a few hours, the simplicity turns into mindless repetition. The career mode tries to mix things up with events like speed breaker tests, which push you to upgrade performance, or elimination races that actually use sectors in a clever way. There are a couple of nice alternative game modes in the arcade mode, especially if you're the kind of player who prefers to be on the side of the law, but for some reason they tied a separate money grind to career progression, which feels unnecessary. Because of this different economy system, the order of unlocks is completely different than the evolution mode. It can be treated as an alternative campaign. To its credit, the game packs in 23 car brands and 57 vehicles, including bikes and even some fictional rides. But it's weird how certain variants of the same model look completely different from the base version. Sometimes the proportions are just off. Overall, it's okay. The fast pace is fun, but the loop is shallow. For a mobile game of its era, it works fine. On PSP though, it feels surface level, almost too faithful to its Java roots. Nostalgic sure, but not something that holds up for long sessions. In the spirit of the late 90s and early 2000s, no platform felt complete without at least one extreme sports racing game. The PSP had a few, and the first one to show up is ATV Offroad Fury, continuing the PS2 series from Climax Brighton. It definitely carries the generational vibe. I started off with Blazin trials and gave the training mode a shot. It covers some basics, but oddly enough, certain stunts aren't explained unless you watch the tutorial video first. Oh, and you'll probably notice the tires don't exactly behave like, well, tires.
I also want to say is that it's just me or that the tires on the ATV is now rotating, or
No, it's not rotating.
So yeah, let's jump into career mode. The tournament setup is straightforward. Finish with enough points to qualify, earn credits and unlock items in the shop. You'll also unlock extras by completing the tutorials and championships. Sounds fine on paper, but the handling is pretty disappointing. Your rider is so fragile that even the smallest bump can send them flying. Even landing stunts that shouldn't be a problem often ejects you off the bike. Combine that with aggressive AI and suddenly even the easiest difficulty feels like a grind just to get comfortable with the controls. This makes freestyle events rather difficult to navigate through, even though it's not purely about performing tricks. It is rather unique with goal options. You can either choose to simply collect the colored rings or perform unique strings of tricks or as many in a single link. But again, that ejection issue is going to happen quite often, and due to the map design for freestyle being very uneven, a lot of the time the game will mistake preloads with wheelies. To add some depth, bikes and tires have adjustable stats, so setups matter depending on the track. There's also a decent amount of visual customization, but the pricing is steep, meaning you'll be grinding a lot. The only alternative I'm aware of is through the card system, which unlocks items from race wins and back in the day was clearly meant to encourage trading with friends online, which also includes the driver avatar setups too, although you'll only have the option to customize suit color and hair color if you play as a female. Within just a year, the series managed to improve on a lot of its system while keeping some of the more interesting features intact. On the surface, Fury Pro feels very similar to Blazin Trials. Same upgrade system, same credit grind, same progression, and card features. But the tweaks they made here really helped the game feel more enjoyable. For starters, your rider isn't nearly as fragile anymore, which subsequently increases the window for stunts. The credit payout is much better, even if the initial unlocks are lower. The AI feels more balanced, and the handling, while not perfect, is noticeably smoother. That alone makes the game far less frustrating than its predecessor. What really sets Fury Pro apart is the expanded content pulled from the PS2 version. You're not just limited to ATVs anymore. Here you get buggies, trucks, bikes, and even rally cars. Unfortunately though, some of those vehicles have questionable handling compared to the ATVs, but the variety adds a lot of flavor to the experience every now and then. The changes massively benefit freestyle events which still have the same goals as before, but it seems they've balanced the score out and made it way higher. The map is slightly better at least. It's a proper stunt arena over just some random open field. Custom tracks are also present for both light and heavy vehicles, although the space is a bit limited. I think these are also usable for online races back in the day as well, which sounds pretty neat. The one area where it doesn't quite measure up is graphics. Visual fidelity takes a hit compared to Blazin Trials, likely sacrificed to make room for all that extra content. It does make it seem like a significantly lower budget game on the surface, but man does it play much better. Overall, Blazin Trials nails the vibe of the era with its fast pace and customization options, but the shallow handling and grind-heavy system hold it back. It's fun in bursts, but the frustration of fragile physics and expensive unlocks makes it tough to stick with for long sessions. While Fury Pro does take a hit in the graphical department, the improvements on gameplay variety, balancing, and handling makes it a lot less frustrating to experience. Personally, I'd take Fury Pro over Blazin Trials any day. The improved handling and balancing alone makes it a smoother ride, and the added vehicle types gives you more ways to mix things up. It's not perfect, but it's a clear step forwards and a much easier game to stick with for longer sessions. Now it's time to tackle the first big elephant in the room, Burnout. Burnout Legends was the series' first step onto portable platforms, and it's a bit tricky to explain because it's kind of its own thing. It pulls together content from the past Burnout titles, so you'll see familiar tracks from the early games, cars from Burnout 2 and 3, progression that feels straight out of Burnout 3, and even the soundtrack from Burnout Revenge. In a way, it's basically a remix or the best of the original trilogy stitched together into one handheld package. Perform well, earn medals, rack up points, and unlock more stuff to play with. For longtime fans, it's a nostalgic trip down memory lanes, almost like your brain is playing tricks on you. For newcomers, it's more like a crash course in what Burnout is all about. How Burnout feels to play since 3, thanks to the very similar handling model and speed. The only real downside is the crash physics, which can feel jankier here and sometimes lead to frustrating results. Outside of that though, it's everything you'd expect from a Burnout game. All the classic race types are here, including the crash events. The PSP does put it in an awkward spot though. Some gameplay tweaks made to fit the handheld don't always land. Crash events are easier than usual, while later car classes tend to auto-drift too much, which can cause unintended crashes when you're just trying to corner normally. Multiplayer is still possible thanks to some setups if you're willing to try it out with some buddies. And while the PSP version is packed with content, the hardware limitations mean you'll run into frame dips and occasional jank. Modern emulators can't smooth that out, but on original hardware it's noticeable. So is it worth playing? Definitely. I personally believe Burnout 3 and Revenge still edge it out. Legends is more of a greatest hits compilation than a definitive entry. Then there's Burnout Dominator, the other PSP entry in the series, and it's a weird one in a few ways. For starters, it wasn't even developed by Criterion. They were busy working on Burnout Paradise at the time, so EA UK took the reins instead. Unlike Legends, this one also got a PS2 port, though that version is basically just a graphical upgrade. The PSP release actually has the edge thanks to an extra track and a couple of extras via DLC content called Carnival City and Redgate. With the store servers being shut down, however, you'll have to find other means to obtain these extra tracks. One big difference, there are no crash events here. Instead, the game introduces new mechanics to keep things fresh. The most notable is the return of burnouts from Burnout 2, a system where you constantly refill your boost by driving dangerously and then burn through a full tank for as long as possible. On top of that, there are new side objectives to unlock cars, and signature takedowns now open up shortcuts on tracks, which adds a nice layer of strategy to the takedowns. Despite the changes, Dominator still feels close to the standards set by Burnout 3, or at least Legends. The big distinction is that most of the content isn't recycled. This is a fully fledged brand new game rather than a remix. The game itself is honestly pretty fun, even if it's not as dense as the earlier entries. You've got all the different car classes with 6 variations, plus the Dominator class at the end, making up the full World Tour series. Most of the cars and stages are brand new, but only a handful of returning vehicles. Missing Crash Mode might feel like a big loss for some fans, but the new mechanics do help fill that gap. The Burnout and Supercharge features are front and center here, and they definitely change the pace. Since they effectively speed the game up, certain race types like burning laps feel balanced around that mechanic, which can give the impression that the game is pushing you to play faster and riskier than usual. There are only 88 events in total, which means you can clear the game pretty quickly. That's fine if you're looking for something short and punchy, but going for full gold medals is a real challenge. Luckily, that's where the PSP shines. You can pick it up and play whenever you want, even if the PS2 version looks better overall. The PSP release does have one unique perk though, the Burnout HQ. Back in the day, this lets you upload high scores online. It doesn't really function anymore, but it's a neat reminder of how the handheld tried to carve out its own identity. Now we're stepping into Disney Pixar's Cars franchise, the box office hit of 2006 that of course got its own game adaptation. But we're not talking about the main console version with its open world and storyline. The PSP release was handled by a different developer, and you can tell right away once you dive into story mode. Instead of an open hub world, races happen back to back with no downtime. The upside is that this gave the developers more freedom with track design. While the console version leaned heavily on maps built for both racing and exploration, the PSP version introduces what you could call evolving tracks. They're not as dramatic as something like Split Second, but each lap the environment can change, throwing in new obstacles or revealing shortcuts for later laps. It's a neat twist that keeps races from feeling too static. Mechanics like jumps and nitrous are still here, and you can use nitrous right from the start without progressing through the story first. That's good because the AI is pretty cracked. They rubberband hard and occasionally pull off unfair pit maneuvers from being oblivious. Story-wise, the focus shifts away from Lightning McQueen and the Piston Cup. Instead, it centers on the Street Tuners gang, who serve as boss races throughout the game. You can play as other characters besides McQueen in story mode and other race modes, but beyond that, the content is fairly straightforward. Overall, this PSP version is an extremely simplified port designed to fit the handheld's limitations. No open world, lighter story, but some clever track design and accessible mechanics. For what it is, it does the job just fine. That being said, we're not done with this Disney franchise just yet. Next up is Cars Race-o-Rama, another port from the movie game series. This one's also a PS2 title and serves as the third major adaptation of the franchise. It's a bit odd that they skipped Mater National for the PSP, so if you want to play the games in order, you'll have to jump back to the PS2 for that one. Like the first PSP game, Race-o-Rama is quite different from its console counterparts. Everything's been simplified from handling, story, and progression. The open world is gone, replaced by a menu-based race selection. The story focuses solely on Lightning McQueen Queen's rivalry with Chick Hicks again, and you can't play as anyone else in story mode, which is a bit disappointing. Progression is straightforward. Win races, collect stars, and unlock boss races for each tier. Beat them, and move on to the next set, and repeat until the final showdown. There are a few extras to keep things interesting. Each track hides 6 wrenches you can collect and use back in Radiator Springs to buy upgrades that unlock shortcuts. They're usually tucked along alternate paths which highlight different ways to tackle each track, though whether those routes are actually faster depends on how well you handle the course. The only tool you've got for exploration is jumping, which helps grab collectibles scattered around. Drifting though is rough. It's way too easy to snap from one direction to another, and the boost system feels way too slow to build up, charging only through drifting and maintaining top speed. It gives a decent burst when full, but since it fills so slowly, you'll rarely get to use it. It's simple, but maybe too simple. Even the writing feels toned down, like a Saturday morning cartoon. It could have borrowed some of the evolving track ideas from the first PSP port, but those have been stripped back too. Still, that makes sense given it was handled by a different developer. It's just a very mediocre game and a very streamlined one. If you're after a quick, easy cars fix on the go, you can pretty much pick this up and beat it in around an hour. Just don't expect depth or charm of the main console versions. But at least it's not as bad as this game. Cars 2, the movie which has been described as a mixed bag due to its over-the-top nature being along the lines of the later Fast and Furious movies. It has also received its own video game adaptation. These are mainly made for the PS3 and Xbox 360, but somehow a PSP port was made, and honestly, this is easily the worst out of the 3 Cars games on this console. So just to start off, this game is not your traditional racer in a sense. It's more like an on-rails racer. There's a bunch of other game modes in here, but it's not really worth looking into because at its core, this game, or rather port, is just simply very poor. The decision to have this camera so close and randomly shifting to look backwards is excruciatingly dumb that it feels like I'm being punished just for experiencing the game for the first time, since, well, any direct collision with obstacle results in this. There's mechanics like gadgets for offensive maneuvers, since this game doesn't strictly have racing as it turns out. You can jump, but it's very poorly thought out that even landing on top of an obstacle also makes you explode. And the boost system, collect enough booster cans to fill up the 4 boost bars to either use them individually or all at once when full to enter the zone, automatically giving you shields which should make you immune to any of... Yeah, this game sucks balls, just go play the other 2. For something a little different, we got Colin McRae Rally 2005, a continuation of Codemaster's long-running rally series that's been around since the PS1 era. The PSP version doesn't stray far from the formula they've perfected over the years. At its core, it's classic rally racing, complete with an impressive damage model for a handheld game. It strikes that sweet spot between arcade and simcade, where you can feel the car build up dirt or snow over time, and accumulated damage all start to affect performance. The game offers several modes. Arcade mode lets you race individual stages or full rally courses, with multiplayer options for turn-based or online competition. Career mode splits into 2 paths: the Colin McRae experience, where you race as McRae himself and learn more about his legacy, and the standard career mode, which gives you freedom to choose your cars and tournaments. The McRae mode is locked to 4-wheel drive vehicles and follows a linear structure, while career mode almost mimics the progression style of Codemaster's later titles, starting you off with 5 cars and gradually expanding your garage as you progress. Damage management plays a big role. You can repair your car between stages, but it costs time. Heavy damage means longer repairs, so driving cleanly is rewarded. Upgrades are earned through short minigames, though they can range from mildly challenging to downright finicky. You only get 2 attempts per car, which makes them feel a bit restrictive. In the Colin McRae experience, we only get to pick 1 upgrade to pick per championship, but in career it entirely depends on the classifications and cleared championships, as there's way more car options in this mode over the other one. Handling, however, is where things get weird. For some reason, driving on tarmac feels almost identical to dirt or snow. There's barely any grip, no matter the surface, but it makes early races frustrating when your car slides around like it's on ice. You can probably counter it using the tuning feature, but it doesn't feel as impactful as expected. Despite that, the game still captures the spirit of the older Colin McRae rally titles. It looks great for a PSP release, but compared to the PS2, PC, or Xbox versions of 2005, this one falls short. If you were around during the PS1 era, it was impossible to miss the face of Crash Bandicoot, the unofficial mascot of PlayStation thanks to its iconic platformers and Crash Team Racing by Naughty Dog Studios. But when the series transitioned to the PS2 era, things got messy. With the IP now under Vivendi, Crash started appearing on multiple consoles. Still, PlayStation wasn't ready to let go, which led to the PS2 and PSP versions of several games, but most importantly right now, Crash Tag Team Racing. This was the third racing spin-off in the franchise, and it brought some genuinely unique ideas to the table. Developed by Radical Entertainment, the same studio behind Simpsons Hit and Run, the game blended racing and platforming in a way that hadn't really been done before. The PSP version differs from the PS2 mainly in graphical fidelity, fewer NPCs, and a strange bug in early builds that replaces cutscenes with the Radical Entertainment logo animation. Otherwise, the story remains the same, a light slapstick-filled comedy setup that exists mostly to justify the racing events. It's goofy, over the top, and very much of its time. Gameplay is where things get interesting. The game is half platformer, half racer. The platforming sections serve as the foundation for the world. 5 themed park areas filled with collectibles, shops, and side quests. Exploration rewards you with coins and power crystals, which unlock shortcuts, new cars, costumes, and other goodies. You'll also find race activities scattered throughout, unlocking tracks and arenas for stunt and combat events. Then there's the main gimmick, the clash system. Suddenly, you're in a temporary alliance where one person drives and the other shoots. You can blast opponents, destructible barriers to unlock shortcuts, or smash decorations to fill your boost meter. Some characters are better than others, depending on their weapon type and car stats, but the system can feel a bit overpowered. If you're solo, getting caught near a clash duo is rough. Item boxes rarely help, and betrayal near the finish line is always a risk, as they steal what would otherwise be a double win. Outside of races, every activity earns coins and power crystals. The latter unlocks platforms that open new theme park areas, meaning you can beat the game with minimal racing if you focus on side quests and minigames instead. Still, without the clash mechanic, races can feel sluggish, especially at lower speeds, exposing how shallow the core driving system really is. Ultimately though, Crash Tag Team Racing is a surprisingly complete portable port. Radical managed to keep nearly all the content and mechanics from the console version, sacrificing only performance and visuals. The camera controls can be annoying without a right analog stick, which may hinder what would be a good platforming experience. But back then, that was a fair trade-off for being able to play this game anywhere. From one legend to another, next up is Crazy Taxi Fare Wars. The name sounds intense, like it's some long-awaited sequel, but in reality, this is just Crazy Taxi 1 and 2 bundled together for the PSP. So most of what you expect from the earlier ports is still here. This version was developed by Sniper Studios and Black Hole Entertainment. The iconic arcade mode remains intact, still as chaotic and fast-paced as ever, complete with time limits, score attacks, and dense traffic. The crazy box and pyramid challenges also make a return, which is great since that's where most of the game's hidden techniques are taught. Maps and character options are all here too, so if you love the San Francisco or New York settings from the original titles, you'll feel right at home. The big new addition is multiplayer. You've got time trial for racing against each other's records, crazy mode for score battles, and head-to-head, which lets players collide and steal passengers directly, which sounds like a surprisingly fun twist. Interestingly, Sniper Studios originally wanted to create a full single-player campaign, being huge fans of the original game, but with a limited budget, they had to settle for adding a multiplayer instead. Honestly, that's not a huge loss as the Crazy Box and Crazy Pyramid challenges already feel like campaigns in their own right. So if you want to experience the legendary arcade chaos of Crazy Taxi 1 and 2, this PSP version is a solid pick, as long as you're okay with the changed soundtrack and the removal of real-world brands. Unfortunately, there's one major caveat. The game can be finicky on custom firmware and emulators. Sometimes it runs perfectly, other times it refuses to boot at all. It's basically a dice roll every time you start it up, but when it does work, Fare Wars delivers the classic high-energy taxi madness now in your pockets. Back in the heyday of extreme sports games, it was common to see titles branded with the names of real-world pros. Publishers loved partnering with athletes, and that trend gave us a wave of games built around their personalities and styles. Dave Mirra's BMX Challenge fits right into that era, a hybrid between racing and stunt challenges that plays much like older BMX titles of the time. You start with a handful of preset riders and customization options, plus different bikes tuned for specific stats and purposes. The courses are built for heavy stunt use, mixing a touch of realism with over-the-top ramps, quarter pipes, and rails. Race events are simple. Finish in the top 3 to move on, but to keep things from feeling like a straight pedal to the finish, performing tricks fills your special meter, giving you a big speed boost. The higher your stunt score, the faster it fills, encouraging you to learn and chain tricks together. That said, the trick list is massive. It looks more like a fighting game move sheet than a BMX guide, so memorizing them all is tough. I ended up sticking to a few reliable ones and winging the inputs. You'll want to be careful though, the rider is fragile. Landing on decorations or failing a trick sends you flying, and crashes drain most of your special meter. A few mistakes can easily cost you the race with no recovery. Because of that, I'd actually recommend starting with the stunt challenges first. They're simpler, purely score-based, and use the same stages as the races. The scoring system is pretty generous thanks to the strong multipliers, so you can rack up huge points in a short time. This results in the stunt challenges being easily the best way to explore the maps and figure out how to grab all these items. There are 2 types scattered around, cosmetics and bikes. Some placed in easy to reach spots, others hidden behind tricky jumps or requiring a good grasp of the game's quirks. The track designs itself is pretty interesting since it has to work for both racing and stunts. You'll often find 2 distinct sections laid out like a circuit for races and a more open arena style area perfect for freestyle runs. In race events, you'll usually loop around these sections 3 times before moving on, while in stunt mode you can just hang out and experiment. I don't have strong feelings about this game overall. It's solid, just with a few minor annoyances. The biggest one for me is that once you trigger the special bar, you can't stop speeding up. It's literally just your rider pedaling faster, but there's no way to tone it down, which can make precise control a bit frustrating. If anything, the story of this game's development sounds a bit more interesting, as originally the IP was under the ownership of Acclaim, only for them to go bankrupt a year after announcing an extension of their contract with Dave Mirra. So the name rights were then sold to Crave, which resulted in the creation of this game and its Wii ports. Earlier we covered Colin McRae Rally 2005, but another entry made its way to the PSP, Colin McRae Dirt 2. This one was developed by Sumo Digital, a studio with a solid track record for ports and original titles alike, so calling this game pretty solid would be fair, but how good is it really? Right off the bat, it's clear that the PSP version is heavily simplified compared to the PC, PS3, and Xbox 360 releases. Those versions leaned on the flashy style introduced in Race Driver Grid, and tried to be somewhat realistic or in-depth with their handling. While Sumo Digital tried to mimic that look and feel, hardware limitations meant scaling things down. The RV style menu is still here, just stripped back and streamlined. Race modes have been reduced to standard circuit and sprint rallies, with a few extra events specified as challenges. Handling follows a similar story to Sumo's Forza Horizon 2 port on the Xbox 360, simplified and very arcadey. It's easy to drive across the board, but that simplicity brings its own problems. Bumps can send cars spinning without warning, landings can feel unpredictable, and random spins happen more often than they should. You'll need to adapt quickly to keep things under control and avoid these kinds of issues. Career mode is divided into 4 tiers from amateur through pro, each with 4 cups containing several races. Winning cups unlocks new cars, body kits, and liveries. That's about the extent of progression, but in typical Sumo Digital fashion, the reduction feels intentional. It keeps the pacing tight and the experience accessible. So while it's not a full substitute for the console version of Dirt 2, it works well as its own thing. A fast, compact rally racer built for quick sessions. For a portable game back in the day, that's a pretty respectable achievement. This one's a weird title for several reasons. On the surface, it looks like another Gran Turismo competitor. Sleek cars, official looking races, and a serious tone. But dig deeper and you'll find something completely different. Skill trees, heavy weaponry, and well, Carnage. Developed by the obscure South Korean studio Axis Entertainment, DT Carnage is actually an indirect sequel to DT Racer, which was more of a straight Gran Turismo clone. This time though, the formula takes a wild turn. The game mixes kart racer mechanics with random item pickups, character-specific skill trees, and unlockable cars and abilities both defensive and offensive. You earn points based on performance. Races take you around the world, with each region offering long and short layouts across several modes. Standard races with twists, time trials, combat events, endurance races, and survival challenges. It sounds ambitious, but the balance is rough from the start. The game's speed is painfully slow unless you pick Daphne, the one character who doesn't feel like she's driving through molasses. Even then, acceleration is weak, and car labels have no purpose. Every car, whether labeled grip or drift, slides like it's on ice the moment you ease off the gas. Skill points are shared per character, meaning progress doesn't carry over. If you switch drivers mid-career, you're forced to grind all over again. And since car unlocks are closer to specific characters, mid-game progression feels sluggish. The cars themselves are fictional, but clearly modeled after real brands, which is a fun touch. Items and skills are hit or miss. The lethal ones are absurdly powerful, capable of wiping out opponents in seconds, while the non-lethal ones either barely do anything or are capable of blocking an entire train of cars when placed correctly. Early races are forgiving, but once enemies unlock offensive skills, they spam them relentlessly. Effects like broken ECU, disabling brakes, or camera distortion effects are annoying but manageable. Tiredness, however, adds input delay and completely wrecks your control, making it the most brutal debuff in the game. Boss races are surprisingly easy if you're using Daphne. They'll sprint ahead early on, but you'll catch up by lap 2. The worst they can do afterwards is spam debuffs, which are more irritating than challenging. After each boss, the game bizarrely shifts into a bowling minigame where you literally murder them to finish the job. It's never explained and the story doesn't help. Something about racing leagues and a missing father, but every boss encounter ends with the protagonist saying, "This is not the person I'm looking for," even when facing female opponents. It's as confusing as it sounds. The PS2 version doesn't fare much better. DT Carnage is frustrating because the potential is there. The ideas are genuinely interesting, but the execution falls flat. The slow default speed kills momentum. The skill tree system ends up limiting the variety instead of expanding it, and the grind makes the progression tedious. There's creativity buried under the chaos, but it never quite comes together. Going back a few years to the 2005 season of Formula 1, we have Formula 1 Grand Prix. Developed by Traveler's Tales and released exclusively for the PSP. This was Sony's first attempt to bring the official F1 license to handhelds. This game is extremely simple and heavily arcade influenced. The handling model is loose and forgiving, tuning options are minimal, and the overall presentation feels cheap. From the limited 6-track soundtrack to the deep-fried driver portraits and stiff 3D animations. Career mode covers the full 2005 season, letting you pick any driver and team, though differences between teams are barely noticeable. The arcade routes makes progression fast and straightforward. Jump from qualifying to race day and then straight to the next weekend. There's no contract management, teammate rivalry, or inbox clutter, just pure racing. But AI opponents are tuned aggressively. Holding pole position after the first lap is nearly impossible, and while the game flashes a damage warning after repeated crashes, there's no visible or mechanical damage to worry about. The real highlight is challenge mode, a collection of short scenario-based events that puts you in the seat of preset drivers under unique conditions. These range from mechanical failures mid-race to sudden weather shifts like the Monaco Fog Challenge. It's easily the most creative part of the game, offering bite-sized chaos that keeps things interesting. Despite the jank, I found Formula 1 Grand Prix to be surprisingly fun. The rapid pacing means you're constantly moving from one race to the next, and the unpredictable AI adds a layer of excitement. It does get frustrating when the top 3 drivers rocket ahead with no chance to catch up, but the game's simplicity makes it easy to pick up and play. For something leaning closer to realism, we've got Formula 1 2006, developed by Sony's Liverpool studio. The game's release was surrounded by odd circumstances. It never officially launched in North America, Australia only received the PS2 version, and it marked the final Formula 1 game published by Sony before the license moved to Codemasters. There were even plans to have netplay initially, but it was taken off before launch. Instead, for the PSP players, the feature is replaced by the ability to transfer profiles, and for the game version, that meant choosing alternating between the PAL version, which suffered from minor performance issues, or the Japanese NTSC release. Compared to F1 2005 Grand Prix, 2006 sits on the opposite end of the spectrum. Where 2005 embraced arcade simplicity, 2006 dives deep into simulation. You start by creating your own driver for career mode, which spans 5 full seasons. Other single-player options include Quick Race, Time Trial, Single Grand Prix, and Championship Career. Outside of career, you race as one of the official 2006 drivers, but in career mode, you begin at the bottom, testing for Super Aguri, Toro Rosso, or Midland F1, and work your way up to the World Driver Championship. The difficulty curve is steep, even on lower settings. The game doesn't shy away from showing how brutal the gap between backmarker and top-tier teams can be. To mirror real-world F1 structure, each race weekend includes free practice sessions and triple qualifying rounds, plus garage management for fuel strategy, tire selection, and car setup. Longer races may require pit stop strategies and interacting with the pit stop minigame to determine whether or not you'll fumble like Ferrari's pit stops. It's possible to achieve strong results with weaker teams if you master tuning and strategies, but the game's damage model is unforgiving. Lose a wing or a wheel and your race is over. The AI can be reckless, often oblivious to your position, making mid-pack racing especially dangerous. Tire heat management is crucial. Misjudging it leads to frequent understeer and gravel traps. Despite the challenge, F1 2006 stands out as the first PSP Formula 1 title to fully commit to simulation-style career progression. Technically, it's impressive for the hardware. The PSP version retains dynamic weather, pit stops, and real-time commentary from James Allen and Martin Brundle.
There's nothing to separate them as they hurtle towards turn 1.
Alongside team radio chatter that keeps races feeling alive. The game even supports ad hoc multiplayer for head-to-head races and includes all 18 circuits and 22 drivers from the 2006 season. Overall, F1 2006 is a tough but rewarding experience. It's an authentic Formula 1 simulation for the PSP, combining depth, realism, and atmosphere in a way few handheld racers manage. After a couple of years, Formula 1 finally returned to handhelds with F1 2009, developed by Sumo Digital and published by Codemasters. This marked Codemasters' first officially licensed F1 title, launching exclusively on PSP, Wii, and iOS, a strange release plan considering the absence of PS2 or PS3 versions. It was the beginning of Codemasters' long-running partnership with Formula 1, which would later evolve into the F1 2010 and present-day F1 series. The PSP version sits in an interesting middle ground between arcade and simulation. Structurally, it's built like a full-scale sim racer, offering career modes lasting from a single race to 3 full seasons, alongside quick race, time trial, and championship options. You can either play as one of the official 2009 drivers or create your own racer to climb through the ranks, taking a lot of inspirations from F1 2006. Before hitting the track, players can fine-tune nearly every setting: difficulty, lap count, damage, penalties, and weather variation. Races can be as short as 3 laps or as long as the full Grand Prix distance. Still an impressive feat for a handheld. The game even includes free practice and qualifying sessions, mirroring the real-world F1 weekend structure. Once you've joined the team through a test event, the game opens up with a calendar system showing race weekends, news updates, and season progress. You can skip straight to race day if you prefer, which keeps pacing brisk. Handling, however, is where things get messy. Cars swing between understeer and oversteer with almost no middle ground, and tuning adjustments rarely fix it. It's especially noticeable in long races. Imagine twitchy steering for 58 laps straight, making the game accessible but occasionally frustrating. Despite that, F1 2009 is packed with authentic details. It features the full 2009 season roster, including the debut of Braun GP, the Singapore Night Race, and all 17 circuits. The Ego engine powers scaled-down visuals that still look impressive for PSP, complete with dynamic weather and pit stops. Commentary and team radio chatter add atmosphere, making races feel alive. The game also supports ad hoc multiplayer for head-to-head races and ghost challenges, rounding out the experience. All 3 PSP Formula 1 titles put the handheld in a unique position. Grand Prix 2005 caters to arcade fans with its fast, accessible gameplay, while F1 2006 leans towards simcade realism with deeper systems and authentic season detail, while 2009 tries to fit in the middle of it. Which one you prefer depends entirely on your racing style. Up next is Fast and Furious Tokyo Drift by Technics. So if I had to sum this game up, I'd say it's probably the closest Genki ever got to having a rival for Tokyo Extreme Racer. Most people remember it from the PS2 version, but there's a PSP port too. Honestly, it's not too wildly different, just the usual graphical tweaks and button remapping. Now, if you've never touched this one, here's the deal. It's not just about blasting down Japanese highways. It also dives into mountain toge runs and drifting, which makes it a bit of a love letter to multiple Japanese street racing subcultures. So to accommodate to all of that, the handling tries to cater to both, resulting in a bit of a mixed bag. Sometimes it feels good, but other times it could be better. The car list is huge, especially Japanese cars. There are so many that the game actually splits dealerships across the map, which is a neat way of nudging you to explore the open world, alongside a multitude of tuning shops, although they don't really change much. And yes, Western cars are here too. Some of them are locked down in terms of customization, but when you do get the chance to mod them, they can be seriously impressive. The game even mixes in official movie-inspired kits with some wild, fictional designs you'd almost never see today. The cool part is you don't need to watch the movie to enjoy it. The story is super light, but if you have watched it, you'll catch little Easter eggs and references sprinkled throughout. Of course, being a Technics game, it's not flawless. Drift detection can be all over the place, sometimes misreading what you're doing and messing up your score, making it feel like the game is rigged against you. On its own, the game is pretty solid, if not a bit shaky at times. It's certainly one of the better games Technic has made in their whole career, and somehow this game is basically the peak of what the Fast and Furious franchise ever offered in gaming. As a PSP title, however, this game is mostly okay. It falls into the category of games where it's mainly similar to the PS2 ports, along with several others so far. The next one is tricky to talk about, not because it's bad, but because it's almost too faithful. Flatout Head On is essentially a straight port of Flatout 2, specifically the Ultimate Carnage version for PC and Xbox 360. Developed by Bugbear Entertainment, the PSP version is so accurate that you'll have nearly the same experience as on those platforms, just scaled down for handheld play. The chaotic demolition derby racing that defines Flatout is fully intact here. The same cars, the same characters, and the same mix of racetracks, arenas, and stunt events. Every mode from the original returns. Standard races, derby battles, and stunt challenges, all with the same progression system and event structure. What makes this port unusual is how little it sacrifices. Most PSP conversions trim content or simplify mechanics, but Head On only scales down texture resolution and graphical fidelity. Everything else like physics, destruction modeling, and event variety remains untouched. It's a remarkable technical achievement considering the PSP's limitations. The game still runs on Bugbear's proprietary physics engine, known for its realistic deformation and debris simulation. Despite the hardware downgrade, crashes remain as good as it is, with cars crumpling and parts flying everywhere. The frame rate holds up well, though occasional dips occur during heavy collisions. In terms of content, all 45 vehicles, 16 tracks, and minigames from Flatout 2 are present. The PSP version even retains the Ragdoll stunt mode. Multiplayer is supported via ad hoc wireless, letting players compete in races or stunt challenges locally. But since the PC version recently gained Steam Workshop support and Steam Deck compatibility, it's now playable portably with better visuals and modding options. That puts the PSP version in a very awkward position. Perfect if you still own a PSP or a modified Vita, but otherwise the PC release is the superior way to experience it. Still, Bugbear deserves major credits. Porting a physics-heavy, content-rich game like Flatout 2 to the PSP without gutting it is no small feat. They managed to preserve the full experience while keeping performance stable, something few studios achieve with handheld conversions of console racers. It's a very familiar story to Ford Street Racing, or depending on the region, Ford Bold Move Street Racing. The naming alone is confusing enough, but regardless of which version you have, this is essentially a faithful port of the original PS2 title. Interestingly, unlike most PSP ports, this one actually gained additional content in the process. Developed by Razorworks, the studio behind most of the Ford racing games, the PSP retains the same core gameplay while expanding the car and track roster. Regional quirks remain intact, compact. It's a nice touch that gives each release a bit of local flavor. Mechanically, the game is simple. The handling, AI behavior, and track design all lean towards very simple experiences. The entire game takes place in Los Angeles, which limits environmental variety, especially in the EU version where the city setting isn't as obvious. To fit the PSP's hardware, the map feels sparse and oddly quiet for one of America's busiest cities, giving the world a strangely isolated atmosphere. Career mode is divided into solo and team championships, where you unlock new tracks, vehicles, and tournaments while grinding for cash to buy faster cars. The standout feature is team racing, the game's main gimmick. You can issue commands to your teammate, telling them to block opponents or start drafting, and with good timing, it can turn races into an easy win. Unfortunately, the AI doesn't always cooperate. Blocking often fails, and drafting can lead to unpredictable collisions. Damage costs eat into your winnings, and since there's no performance tuning, repairs directly slow your progression. Alternatively, solo racing provides a stripped-down experience with no economy or garage management. It's not the most exciting racer on the platform and can fall down the rather monotonous experience after a while. It doesn't really have the spice that most other Ford racing games tend to have, from either having challenging races, over-the-top track design, or a goofy yet charming storyline like in Ford vs Chevy, which unfortunately puts this title a bit on the lower scale of Ford racing titles, but as a PSP port, it's arguably better than the original versions, just for the fact that it has more content, which is a very rare advantage a portable port tends to carry. The other Ford racing game on PSP switches the city streets for the wilderness, simply titled Ford Racing Off-Road. It expands the brand's lineup to include both Ford and Land Rover vehicles. Developed again by Razorworks, this entry feels instantly familiar if you've played Ford Street Racing or earlier titles in the series. The gameplay structure, menus, and progression system are nearly identical, though the shift to off-road terrain gives it a slight edge to experiment. Unfortunately, the PSP version doesn't differ much from the PS2 release. Without the team racing gimmick that defines street racing, the experience can be a hit or miss, enjoyable in short bursts but repetitive over time, especially in tournament mode and its collection of standard race events, dangling a large sum of cash early on to tempt players into buying high-end vehicles early. Career mode adds a bit more structure. You start with limited funds and can only afford the Ford Ranger and Land Rover Defender. The remaining 14 vehicles unlock gradually as you win events and earn money. Career progression introduces a route selection system, letting you choose which events to tackle next. Regular races are mandatory, but special challenges fill the branching paths between them, helping break up the monotony. These challenges are short, skill-based events that make use of track layouts. They're a great way to learn the terrain and add variety to the grind. The game's three main environments aren't visually stunning, but their multi-path layouts keep races interesting. The AI deserves a mention too. It's aggressive, often blocking or ramming you off the track, and the rubber banding can get extreme in certain sections. It keeps races tense but occasionally frustrating. That is unfortunately the big problem with the two Ford racing games on the PSP currently. At their best, it's just an average racing game that works fine enough, but the jank can hamper progression enough to annoy people out of enjoying them. They're like the perfect example of a middle of the line, average 5 out of 10 games that is good enough to waste your time, but doesn't really stand up against any other game with better design mechanics. It's hard to talk about full auto 2 Battlelines without first acknowledging the state of the car combat genre itself. Once a dominant force in the late 90s and early 2000s, led by Twisted Metal, Vigilante 8, and Carmageddon, the genre slowly faded through the 2010s. What was once mainstream became niche, with only a handful of modern attempts recapturing that chaotic magic. So with that prologue setup, have you heard of Full Auto 2 Battlelines? A car combat title developed by Pseudo Interactive and published by Sega for the PS3, a game that by all means plays out like your average car combat experience with partial racing content included. It seems like a pretty solid game, if not a bit formulaic, but unfortunately this is not the game we're looking at. Instead, shift your attention to the PSP version made by Deep Fried Entertainment. Yes, that's the studio's real name, and fittingly, their game feels just as deep fried. Compared to the PS3 release, the PSP port is wildly janky. Gameplay swings between manageable variable and chaotic, with cars that can go from stable to uncontrollable in seconds. Steering feels twitchy, almost hyperactive, and the physics often behave unpredictably. Combat is a mixed bag. The health system is split across 4 car sides, displayed in the HUD over in the corner there. Once any side's health bar empties, your car explodes instantly. This design makes rear attacks especially punishing, since AI opponents tend to fixate on your back bumper. Combined with aggressive enemy spam and uneven weapon balance, survival can feel unfair. Yet somehow it's not even the worst part of the game. Most missions revolve around destruction rather than racing. Objectives include destroy X amount of enemies and eliminate Y amount of traffic cars. Those are pretty clear goals, right? Well, then you have things like trigger special events. The problem, there's no clear indicator for what counts as a special event, forcing trial and error frustration. Fail any objective and you can't progress.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Winning races or missions unlocks decals and cosmetic upgrades, but they're minimal. It's hardly worth the effort. The game's potential is obvious, especially given how solid the PS3 version was, but this PSP version... What's a PlayStation console without a Gran Turismo title on it? Coincidentally, Gran Turismo PSP arrived alongside the launch of the PSP 2000 model. It was developed by Polyphony Digital themselves, as they wanted to make sure it's up to their standard, marking the series' first handheld entry and one of the most ambitious racing titles ever built for portable hardware. Unfortunately, the game doesn't start off on the best note. First off, your starter car is randomized, and the dealership rotates in a specific cycle, which changes every 2 in-game days. It seems to have been made to encourage online trading and car sharing between players, but for solo players, it quickly becomes tedious. If you don't have enough credits for a specific car, you just have 1 day to grind before the dealership rotates again. Otherwise, you could be waiting hundreds of in-game days for the dealership to reappear. It's one of those interesting on paper types of ideas, but the way it's executed is frustrating, especially considering the game's staggering 800 plus car roster, featuring brands like Ferrari, Lamborghini, and Bugatti for the first time in the series. Despite the massive selection, there's no upgrade system, only tuning options for tires, gear ratios, and handling. The most impactful setting is the choice between standard and professional handling, which drastically changes how cars respond. There's also no traditional Gran Turismo mode. The closest thing to anything related to a career mode comes from the driving challenges. They're reminiscent of GT4 Prologue's license tests and mission races. These include short skill tests, full lap trials, and mini races. There are no prize cars, only cash rewards. Achieving gold automatically grants silver and bronze payouts too, making this the fastest way to earn money. Compared to the mainline GT games though, the time limits are lenient, reflecting the simplified controls, so there is an acknowledgement about the PSP's limitation at the very least. Other ways for earning credits can be seen through custom races across 45 tracks, most ported directly from Gran Turismo 4. You can set up time trials, normal races, or drift trials, each with multiple difficulty tiers that must be unlocked individually per track. This means even skilled players are forced to slog through easy AI opponents before reaching higher challenges, a questionable design meant to simulate progression, which would work well if there's only a very few amount of tracks, but the way it is ends up being tedious. Credit rewards scale with race length and duration. Longer circuits like the Nürburgring pay out more, making endurance runs worthwhile. Like most other racing games here, multiplayer functions have been restored, somewhat. It takes a bit of setup. It is interesting to witness the beginning of this function, since this is the earliest example of an online Gran Turismo race outside of beta tests before it became normalized with GT5. On the technical side, Gran Turismo PSP is stunning. It runs at 60 frames per second, with visuals only slightly below GT4 despite fitting into a 1GB UMD. The lighting, reflections, and car models are remarkably detailed, showcasing just how powerful the PSP could be when pushed to its limits. However, the game's structure doesn't age well. The rotating dealership system becomes a slog, forcing players to grind endlessly or repeatedly enter and exit races to refresh stock. The sheer volume of driving challenges can take days to complete, and once you've cleared them, there's little left beyond repeating standard races. In many ways, Gran Turismo PSP feels more like a technical masterpiece. It's hard not to admire what Polyphony Digital achieved here, yet equally hard not to wish they thought more about long-term playability. Now, here's a game that's hard to categorize, a game by Side Interactive, the people behind Speed Racer, the video game. GripShift isn't just a racer, but it may feel or seem familiar to another franchise. It's somewhere in between, a hybrid that mixes platforming, stunt driving, and time trial racing into one surprisingly cohesive package. Originally released as one of the PSP's early titles, it's one of those games that feels like a tech demo turned full release, but in the best way possible. The premise is simple. Drive through a series of obstacle-filled tracks, collect items, and reach the goal as fast as possible. But the execution is anything but simple. Each track is built like a floating playground in the sky, full of ramps, loops, jumps, and hazards that demand precision driving. You're constantly balancing speed and control, trying not to fall off while chasing collectibles and shortcuts. Play around for a bit and you'll start to notice a lot of similarities to the Trackmania series. The importance of grip and maximizing contact with the ground to result in faster finish is the biggest evidence of this. Card customization is a bit limited. There's only a body, livery, sticker, and rims as options, but only the body affects the stats. But is it worth the slight advantage on specific challenges though? I mean, just look at all the menus you have to go through just to change one option every time. Progression is handled through challenge tiers, each introducing new mechanics and tougher layouts. There's a mix of standard races, time trials, and puzzle-like stages where you have to figure out how to reach hidden collectibles. The game even throws in power-ups and hazards for race events, giving it a faint kart racer flavor, though the focus is still on skillful driving rather than combat. After all, we need to complete platforming challenges to unlock more race events. Handling feels tight and responsive surprisingly, so for a game that asks you to pull off platforming maneuvers at high speed, it's one of those games that rewards mastery. Once you get used to the controls, you start chaining stunts and shortcuts like it's second nature. Suddenly, you'll start seeing alternative pathways that seem completely made up. Visually, GripShift is bright and colorful, with tracks that look like roller coasters suspended in space, which is very evident from the custom track creator and alternative modes. It's not the most technically impressive PSP racer, but its creativity more than makes up for it. There's also a decent amount of replay value thanks to collectibles and score challenges, though the repetition can set in after a while. The game does feature a ton of DLC content, but you'll have to find ways to activate them, though normally emulation sites should have them available since there was quite a massive amount available for this game. It's not the kind of game you play for pure racing thrills, but for the satisfaction of mastering its chaotic, gravity-defying tracks. Originally an arcade release in 2008, GTI Club Super Mini Festa later made its way to the Wii and PSP in 2010, bringing its quirky, high-energy racing style to handheld players. As the name suggests, the game focuses on small hatchbacks from brands like Volkswagen, Peugeot, Abarth, Mini, and others, each with their own 4 stats that will differ between each other. There are no sports cars or sedans here, just compact machines built for tight, twisty tracks. The driving physics complement the over-the-top track design, delivering that unmistakable Japanese arcade racer feel. Drifting is easier to pick up but tricky to master on sharper corners, and the exaggerated car animations from tilting, bouncing, and wobbling give the overall impression of racing toy cars. It's like Chorokyu reimagined with smoother handling and more grounded proportions. Progression is tied to a mileage system, rewarding players for distance driven. Hitting milestones unlocks performance upgrades, new liveries, body kits, and additional cars. What's clever is how repeated cars offers evolve. If a previously seen model that you didn't pick since the starter selection reappears later, it may come with improved stats, eliminating the need to grind from scratch. It's honestly a pretty smart design choice, and the devs deserve to be recognized for it. Events span 5 regions: France, Italy, Britain, the United States, and Japan, each with a distinct visual flair and track personality. The game modes include Escape Race and Traffic Escape, standard races with or without traffic, plus a variety of mini-games that turns the game into a party game. These mini-games are delightfully chaotic. Car Soccer, which the AI hilariously struggles, Tomato Blasting, Coin Collecting, King of the Hill with Presents, and Bomb Tag. They're silly, fast, and a bit inconsistent, but still fun. They're pretty good breaks between race events that are always present in each region. But since they're mainly based on performances like completion time or incredibly high scores, you'd want to aim for better ones after significantly improving on your favorite cars anyways. Visually, the game is vibrant and detailed, with expressive animations and colorful environments. The soundtrack is packed with bangers that fuels that pure arcade energy from start to finish. It does suffer from similar problems as other Japanese arcade racers of the time, like for example, menuing. If you've unlocked a customization part and want to install it, you have to first exit the event selection screen, then the region selection screen, leave the career mode menu, enter the garage, and then pick whichever car you want to edit. In short, GTI Club Super Mini Festa is a hidden gem. Even as I'm writing this script, I just want to jump back in and spend another hour in the game and possibly look to see the rest of this franchise. It's that good. In fact, the higher difficulties introduce completely new mechanics where racetracks completely shift every lap, introducing new sides of the map and shortcuts to discover. Its gameplay is tight, progression smartly designed, and variety unmatched among PSP arcade racers. It's easily one of the best pure arcade experiences in this collection. If you've never tried it, you're missing out on one of Konami's finest racing experiments. Now this one's kinda surprising. I honestly expected more PSP ports of Hot Wheels games, but somehow there's only one. Just one. For a franchise that basically ruled the late 90s and early 2000s, from toy lines to video games and even animated shows, that's pretty wild. So seeing only a single entry on PSP feels weirdly rare. Unfortunately, Ultimate Racing doesn't really carry the Hot Wheels name with much pride. It's probably one of the blandest Hot Wheels races I've played so far, with only a few redeeming bits here and there. Right from the menus, it feels cheap. There's a decent number of cars, sure, but a lot more types I'm unaware of, and most of them are locked behind progression. So you'll be grinding leagues first, each made up with several races stitched together. The catch, you have to finish in the top 3 every time to move on. Fall below that even in the last race and you're restarting the whole league. There doesn't seem to be any reasonable excuse why we can't just restart that specific race again. Even arcade racers tend to at least have a life system in place for this kind of progression. Handling's another headache. You either understeer like a truck or oversteer like you're driving on ice. No middle ground. The car stats don't help either. What does 1 out of 5 handling even mean? Every car has the same rating, whether it turns like a boat or spins like a Ferrari. It's like the devs just gave up and copy-pasted everything. And that's a shame, because the tracks themselves are actually pretty cool. They've got that Acceleracers vibe, wild layouts, crazy environments, and tight corners. But the gimmicks, not so much. Timer-based hazards sound fun until you realize how inconsistent they are. Some traps only trigger when you drive into them, which is fine. Others are on a timer and just ruin your run, like the volcano ring. You can deal with it using the time slow ability or a boost, but the tiger head trap in the desert map, forget it. You think slowing down will help you squeeze through, but you're too slow to make it, and hitting the bottom jaw counts as a fail. These design flaws end up hurting other parts of the game too. You need to pass hazards cleanly to refill your nitrous or time slow gauge, so messing up even once can ruin your rhythm. The tracks look great, but the physics really don't like orientation changes. You'll feel it when the car suddenly decides gravity's optional. So yeah, Ultimate Racing has some neat ideas buried under a pile of questionable design choices. It's got potential, but the execution just doesn't land. Cool visuals, but bad handling and weird progression. Overall, it sits in the lower half of Hot Wheels games for me, and possibly the PSP Racer roster. I think it's fair to say Initial D is basically the king of toge racing when it comes to media. It's the first thing that pops up into most people's heads when you mention mountain racing, thanks to its solid storylines, intense battles, and of course, that iconic Eurobeat soundtrack. But when it comes to video games, things get a bit sparse. There have been plenty of nods to Initial D across other racing games, but actual Initial D titles, pretty rare, especially console releases. Most of them stayed locked to the arcades, so seeing one pop up on PSP is kind of a big deal. Unfortunately, Street Stage never left Japan officially. There's a fan translation patch now that swaps textures through emulation. Gameplay wise, this is basically a portable version of Initial D Arcade Stage 3, though not everything made the jump. The main mode, Legend of the Streets, is still here. You play as your own racer, taking on characters across different mountain passes, to Tsuchisaka at the top. The snowy Akina track from the arcade version got cut, so you're down to 8 tracks instead of 9. Car selection is solid, 35 cars from 7 Japanese brands, and each one has visual tuning options. The way you unlock them though is kinda weird. I'll get to that in a second. Handling is pure arcade fun. Drifting is super easy once you get the hang of it. Just let go of the throttle to slide through corners. Tap the brakes mid-drift to change direction, or pull off a kansai drift if you're feeling fancy. Collisions don't slow you down much unless you really stick to the walls, and the speed is fast. Like anime power fantasy fast. It makes you feel like a Togi legend even if you're just starting out. But don't get too comfy. The difficulty ramps up quick. It's still an arcade game at heart, so mastering cornering is everything. A few bad turns can completely flip a race, but at the very least you don't have to win to get these cards. This is one of the PSP's exclusive features. You earn collectible cards after races. They can unlock characters, manga scenes, CG art, or track info for the glossary, but they also tie into upgrades. There are 2 types, performance and visual tuning. Performance cards are simple, 1 type per car, but you need 5 copies to max it out. Visual tuning cards are split by parts like spoilers, bumpers, and side skirts. The problem, they're all mixed into the same pool as the collectible cards, and you can get duplicates. So yeah, it's a grind. You can trade cards online, which was probably meant to make the system less painful, but without that feature, it's pure RNG misery. Thankfully, you don't need upgrades to win. Mastering drifts is enough to carry you through most races. Once you beat Legend of the Streets, you unlock Bunta's Challenge, the hardest mode in the game. It's brutal, but also the ultimate test of skill. Street Stage is a tight, fast, and fun racer. Being the only console port of Arcade Stage 3 makes it a must-try for fans who want that authentic Initial D experience without hunting down an arcade cabinet. The card system's annoying, sure, but the gameplay more than makes up for it. Plus, it's packed with classic Eurobeat tracks that still slap today. If you're into Toge racing or just want that nostalgic rush, this one's absolutely worth checking out. When I was checking what games to cover next, I was honestly surprised to see Juiced pop up here. Apparently, the series got a PSP port too, which I didn't expect, but the part that really threw me off was the title, Juiced Eliminator. It sounds like some kind of spin-off or side story. Turns out, it's actually just a portable version of the first Juiced game. If you've played the original, you'll feel right at home. The core gameplay is basically the same, from race types, similar car selection and upgrades, league progression, betting, pink slips, all that good stuff. Even the handling feels familiar, though it's been tweaked a bit since the PSP doesn't have pressure-sensitive controls. It's still close enough to the PC version that you'll notice the same vibe. The biggest change is the rival crews. They're completely different this time, though they behave pretty much the same way. Their respect meter still depends on what car you drive, how you race, your betting habits, and the event type. As you climb through tiers, you unlock more interactions like hosting races in their territory or betting pink slips. So yeah, the system's still there, just with new faces. Then there's the new Eliminator mode, which, as the name suggests, is all about elimination races. Sadly, it falls into the same trap as other games that tried this. Eliminations happen by lap count instead of time or position, potentially damaging the overall pacing. Outside of that, everything else is familiar circuit races, point-to-point runs, drag races, and show-off events all return. Honestly, there's not a ton to say about Eliminator. It's not bad, but it's not really different either. Most of the changes or additions are minor, some necessary for the PSP's controls, others just there. At least the calendar system is still intact, so you can skip the Eliminator events whenever they pop up. The sequel's PSP port is a bit more straightforward. Most of the changes here come down to trimming things to fit the handheld. So let me walk you through the intro. You start by entering your name, creating a save file, jumping straight into the tutorial circuit and drift events, earning some cash, buying your starter car, and then diving into the league climb. Pretty standard stuff. But right away, you'll notice a few differences. There's no character model selection. Actually, there aren't any 3D character models at all. Not for you, not for your rivals. That's the first big cut, removing all non-car animations to save space and performance. Instead, you get static face portraits, and rivals now have these weird reaction images that pop up whenever you overtake them. It's something. Handling has been tweaked again to fit the PSP's limited controls, but it's not great. Drifting feels off. Cars can get really twitchy when you try to switch direction, and bumps can send you flying in unpredictable ways. It makes some race types feel more frustrating than fun. Customization also took a hit. Visual upgrades are limited, and sometimes those decals just vanish. I'm not sure if that's a game bug or an emulator issue, but it's pretty funny seeing rivals drive around in what looks like completely stock cars. I suppose back in the day, if you were a Juiced fan, these ports probably made sense. Quick races on the go, familiar mechanics, same vibe, but now they don't really hold up. Eliminator's new content doesn't add much, and Juice 2 feels like a downgrade overall. Considering both games run fine on low-end laptops or even a Steam Deck now, there's not much reason to revisit the PSP versions unless you're curious about how they handled the transition to handheld. Don't get me wrong, they still carry that Juice DNA, so they're not bad games by any means, but as ports, they feel more like time capsules. Interesting to look back on, not something you'd really want to play today. Alright, let's take a quick break from the usual racing foundations because this one's a bit different. Imagine a fighter jet racing game that borrows ideas from the anti-gravity genre. Sounds wild, right? I won't lie though, the game feels cheap right from the menus. You can tell it's a low-budget project just by looking at it, but surprisingly, it's not bad at all once you start playing. There are only two event types here, racing and dogfighting. A pretty simple setup. The planes control intuitively if you've played any anti-gravity racer before. X to accelerate, square to air brake, R and L for power-ups, and circle for barrel rolls. Racing's straightforward. Finish first while dodging opponents and hazards. You'll use air brakes through tight corners and caves, fly low to refill boost, and try not to get blown up. Because yeah, most weapons are homing missiles, and one hit means instant destruction. Luckily, respawns are instant, so you're back in the action right away. The real threat is the opponents chasing your tail. If they're locked onto your engine, it gets annoying fast, but there's a way to deal with it. Barrel rolls are busted in this game. As long as you've got some boost, you can dodge basically anything. It's hilarious how effective it is. Dogfighting's the other mode. Basically an arena battle where everyone has machine guns. The goal's simple, rack up as many kills as possible before the timer runs out. You can chase enemies down manually or grab pickups for easier kills. It's a bit repetitive and tedious since it's timer based, but it works fine for what it is. These two modes alternate through the career cups, where you earn money and unlock new planes. Each plane has speed, agility, and power stats, which I believe to mean speed, handling, and durability. Better agility means smoother control, and higher power means you can take more machine gun hits. You can upgrade these with performance parts, though it gets grindy since each plane has its own set. Visual customization is limited to stickers and decals, and they cost money too. Honestly, the default plane designs already look good, so it's smarter to save up your cash for performance upgrades instead. The grind's kind of a bummer though. Gameplay variety mostly comes from the maps and planes themselves. Since you're just alternating between racing and dogfighting, it can get repetitive if you're not into the core mechanics. Still, it's a solid experience with overall fun controls, decent sense of speed, and some cool ideas buried under the simplicity. I just wish they added more variety, like a destruction-based race mode or even a stunt scoring system. That spiced things up nicely, though the PSP's limited buttons probably made that tough to pull off. So yeah, Muck is one of those games that's rough around the edges, but surprisingly enjoyable once you get into it. It's not perfect, but it's got charm, especially if you're into weird, experimental racers. Here's another weird style of racing games that you don't really see anymore, especially coming from codemasters of all studios. Micro Machines V4 is a toy car racing game with a dynamic top-down view and item-based combat. Conceptually, I really like the idea. There's a lot of creativity here, racing tiny cars across household environments, dodging hazards, and triggering that nostalgic toy race feeling some players might remember from their childhoods. But I've got issues with how the game handles its mechanics. The dynamic camera, for one, is tough to get used to. I'm way more comfortable with static top-down racers. They make steering feel predictable. The dynamic camera here constantly shifts and rotates, which throws off your orientation mid-turn. I end up oversteering or understeering way more out of reflex than I'd like. There's a classic camera option, but it doesn't really fix the problem. As for game modes, there are a few to pick from. Battle races use a tug-of-war scoring system. The goal is to leave your opponents behind to gain points. points. It's an interesting idea, kinda like a Toge-style scoring system, but it gets tedious fast. You have to win consistently or the match drags on for ages until the final countdown kicks in. I get that it's meant to be skill-based, but the pacing feels off. Then there's the normal race, which is fine, though the health system can mess you up with missing parts without respawning. And finally, checkpoint races, which are pretty tough thanks to tight time limits. Winning unlocks new car variations across 25 types, mostly color swaps with maybe slight stat differences. I'd love to say I got far enough to test them all, but honestly, the dynamic camera kept tripping me up. No matter how much I tried to adapt, it just kept messing up with my steering, making it hard to enjoy the game properly. So yeah, Micro Machines V4 has charm and creativity, but the execution really holds it back. It's one of those games that's fun in concept but frustrating in practice, especially if you're not used to that constantly shifting camera. I think it's safe to say this is one of those series most of us instantly recognize. Midnight Club was the street racing series from Rockstar. Extreme speeds, weaving through city traffic, and that signature chaos of dodging cars at full throttle. That's basically the heart of Midnight Club. It was legendary on PS2 and the consoles that followed, so seeing it make its way to PSP during the series' peak makes perfect sense. Midnight Club 3 Dub Edition and Midnight Club LA Remix. Starting with Dub Edition, it's actually a pretty faithful adaptation of the PS2 version. Most of the content and features are intact, with only minor changes to fit the handheld. The controls though, yeah, they're a bit weird. The D-pad doesn't work for steering, square is boost, triangle is brake and reverse, circle activates powers, and the right trigger is handbrake. Some of that makes sense, but it definitely feels awkward at first. I mean, I guess you really only need the handbrake with how fast this game's pacing can go. You get used to it eventually, but it's not the same intuitive setup. A few visual effects were toned down too, which slightly reduces the sense of speed. Not by much, but enough to notice. There are other small changes, like how you now have to follow characters to races instead of meeting them directly. It doesn't really affect gameplay if you already know the race locations, but it's a strange tweak. Customization options were trimmed down, and graphics took a hit, which is understandable given the PSP's limitations. Outside of that though, it's basically the PS2 game. Same cities, same race types, same rival clubs. It's impressive how much they managed to keep intact. The only real downside is that the PSP version doesn't include the remix content. So no Tokyo Challenge, fewer cars, and a smaller soundtrack. Performance can also dip on real hardware thanks to the heavy traffic from what I've gathered through forums, which makes the PS2 Remix Edition the better pick overall. Still, this port is kind of a marvel. The fact that Rockstar managed to squeeze Midnight Club 3 onto a portable console with minimal sacrifices is impressive. Most of what's missing is purely visual, while the core gameplay stays solid, and honestly for its time, that was enough Midnight Club on the go. It's kind of a similar story with Midnight Club LA Remix, though porting the PS3 and Xbox 360 versions to PSP was definitely a bigger challenge, yet somehow they pulled it off. The PSP version feels very close to Midnight Club 3 in structure. A lot of the original game's story and characters remain, but naturally some sacrifices had to be made. The map size was reduced, and from what I can tell, it's based on a reworked version of Midnight Club 2's Los Angeles map. To make up for that, they added the missing Tokyo Challenge from Midnight Club 3 Remix, which is a nice touch. It does split the car roster though, so if your favorite ride isn't in the LA career, it's probably tucked away in Tokyo. Most of the story cutscenes were removed to save space and avoid using low poly character models. Instead, character interactions happen through phone calls, which actually fits the vibe pretty well. Police chases during free roam were also cut, reverting back to Midnight Club 3's race-only cop encounters and occasional roadblocks. So yeah, this port had to make a lot of compromises to fit on the PSP, but honestly, the core gameplay still feels great. The racing, the sense of speed, the city layouts, all of it holds up surprisingly well. It really shows how smart the devs were about what to cut and what to keep. Compared to Midnight Club 3, LA Remix sits in a unique spot. It shares a lot of the same DNA, but with different implementations, so the experience between the two versions feels distinct. And honestly, getting to race through Tokyo with LA's physics system, that alone makes it worth checking out, especially if you only got a PSP back then. During the unveiling of the PS3, Sony started pivoting its first-party games towards player creativity, building experiences that encourage sharing and personalization. The biggest result of that movement was Little Big Planet, the platformer built around the slogan, play, share, create. And in many ways, Modnation Racers followed the same philosophy, offering deep customization for avatars, cars, and even tracks. Of course, these games were designed for the PS3, so when Modnation Racers was ported to the PSP, the big question was, what did they have to sacrifice to make it work? The PSP version mostly loses out in graphics, but the full story campaign is intact, spanning several chapters of racing events. It's straightforward, though variety is limited, and there aren't many alternative modes to explore. Gameplay revolves around classic kart racing mechanic, power-ups, drifting, and complex tracks filled with hazards or alternate routes. You can shunt and stomp opponents or perform mid-air stunts to earn points, which fills a meter used for nitrous boosts and special attacks. Nitrous becomes essential since most alternate paths are off-road and slow you down enough for rivals to catch up. As you progress through career races, you gradually unlock customization features starting with your avatar, then cars, and finally track creation. Each offers tons of options, from chassis types and decals to terrain tools and props. More unlocks come from completing career objectives, though a large portion was tied to the online servers, which Sony shut down years ago. Unlike Little Big Planet, there hasn't been much traction for a custom server revival, though the community has worked hard to preserve player-made content. Even with those limitations, Modnation Racers on PSP is still a solid experience. It leans a bit too heavily on the generic side of kart racers, but the customization and creative spirit remain intact. Just don't expect to fully 100% the game anymore, as some of that content is lost to time. Alright, let's switch gears for a bit. From street racing to something a lot louder and heavier. Back in the 80s, 90s, and early 2000s, monster trucks were huge, especially in the US. Big machines, massive tires, smashing through junkyards, hitting ramps, and pulling off wild stunts. They were full-on spectacles. Naturally, the popularity spilled into video games, and on PSP we got two under the Monster Jam banner. The first one's Path of Destruction. Despite showing off a bunch of licensed trucks, you can actually build your own monster truck here, picking the body, colors, decals, and accessories. Only the body affects stats, so everything else is just for style. Early on though, it's smarter to use licensed trucks since they've got slightly better stats. From there, you pick your area and event type. There's freestyle and stunt challenge for the stunt side of things, though weirdly, if you're into racing, you got a few options. You got circuit races, team race, same idea, but you pick one of the opponents as your teammate. Stadium race, kind of like rally racing, where two trucks run mirrored tracks without direct contact. Time crunch and gate rush, both are time trials but with different layouts and visibility. They sound similar, but each mode has its own quirks. Freestyle is all about doing whatever stunts you can for points, while Stunt Challenge gives specific objectives. Time Crunch and Gate Rush both involve passing through gates, but one shows all gates up front, while the other hides them, turning it into a memorization game instead of pure control. Handling's fine once you get used to it, though the controls can feel odd at first. You use the left shoulder buttons for rear wheel steering and hold the right shoulder to maneuver mid-air. The racing modes though can get frustrating. Collisions stop you dead if you hit someone from behind, killing your momentum instantly. Stadium races are intense, but also expose the game's janky physics, as sometimes obstacles just send you out of control for no reason. Winning events earns XP based on difficulty, unlocking new trucks, venues, and customization parts. The progression is simple and generous, you don't really need to grind, but the balance gets weird later on. Some mid-tier custom bodies have way better stats than licensed trucks at the same level. The only ones that beat them are the boss trucks, which you can unlock by beating special events. These guys are fast and thankfully just as overpowered when you drive them yourself. From there, it's all about clearing events, unlocking venues, leveling up, and collecting everything. The XP system's fair and progression feels smooth. The only real issue is the physics during races. They can be unpredictable and occasionally frustrating. Still, Path of Destruction is fun. It's janky, sure, but that jank gives it personality. It keeps you on your toes and stops the game from feeling monotonous. It's rough around the edges, but in a way that makes it more entertaining. The second Monster Jam title actually came out 2 years before Path of Destruction. It was handled by a different developer but still published by Activision. Compared to Path of Destruction, this one's even simpler both in gameplay and variety. You can tell they wore their inspirations proudly because on the surface it looks a lot like the Flatout games. The menus, the art style, even the general vibe. It's got that same chaotic arcade energy, complete with loud car callouts when you're picking your truck.
You won't believe what this truck dares in the air. Here's Pastrana 199.
From the truck selection alone, you can tell how straightforward the game is. None of the monster trucks have visible stat differences, at least from what I've seen, so it really just comes down to which chassis and livery you like the best. That said, plenty of named trucks are locked behind progression and challenges, which gives you something to work towards. There are 10 game modes total, all accessible in Quick Race, but the single player campaign organizes them into 4 categories. Speedster, which are racing focused events like circuits, eliminators and head-to-head. Smasher, which are destruction based modes like Devastator and Airstrike, plus bowling style minigames. Stuntman, which includes stunt events like Monster Jump, Trickster and Skill Jump. And the World Cup, the big one, featuring 22 events where you race one-on-one through freestyle and stadium racing. Most of these modes are pretty simple. They all boil down to either finishing first or racking up enough damage or stunt points. The physics are basic but comfortable, and racing feels easy to grasp. Nitrous is ridiculously overpowered though. You earn it by smashing objects and doing stunts, and the AI seems balanced around you constantly using it, so you kinda have to treat races like Burnout events even if the game doesn't fully support that style. Stunts are handled in a weird way. You basically spam nitrous and spin mid-air as much as possible. The game doesn't penalize bad landings, so you can rack up multipliers just by being chaotic. Sometimes it even glitches and you can get stuck upside down while your score keeps climbing. There's also a damage system where your truck loses panels or even wheels, which affects handling. The devs actually turned that into a challenge, requiring you to lose a wheel mid-race to unlock a new truck. Some modes stand out, like head-to-head, where 2 trucks race normally while another 2 run the same track in reverse, or Skill Jump, which feels straight out of flat-out stunt minigames. True to its name, most races take place in cityscapes and construction zones, giving it a distinct urban flavor. Outside of that, there's not much else to dig into. Unlike Path of Destruction, there's no upgrade or customization system, just truck selection. So yeah, Urban Assault lives up to its name as a simple arcade-style monster truck game. It's straightforward fun, easy to pick up, not much to overthink. If Path of Destruction's progression system feels too heavy, this is a good alternative. Though honestly, the PS2 version likely holds up better today. Despite the name, MotoGP 2006 isn't exactly what I'd call a clear-cut simcade. It's made by Bandai Namco, and you can feel the Ridge Racer and R-Racing Evolution DNA all over. It features both the 2005 and 2006 MotoGP rosters, which is a nice touch, but once you start riding, things get interesting. The physics are weird. The bikes constantly understeer even when you're leaning aggressively. You'll find yourself slowing down way more than you'd expect, even for light corners. There's some tuning available, but it's minimal, and whatever you do, don't turn on the sim setting. All it does is make your rider fall off the bike every few seconds. It's funny at first, but yeah, not ideal. This handling setup makes the game challenging, but not in a straightforward way. So let's talk about progression. The reward screen gives you hints on how to unlock new bikes and illustrations, usually by winning races in arcade mode or completing full seasons in career mode. Arcade mode is still useful here since it helps unlock stuff outside of career, and it's more direct compared to the team-based progression. In career mode, you can race as your own custom rider or one of the real pros from that era. It doesn't change much, mostly just your name since everyone wears their team suits anyways. The real difference comes from the bikes themselves. Each have unique stats, and every team has a minimum placement requirement. It's a bit counterintuitive since rewards require outright wins, so you'll need to grind with weaker teams first to build reputation. There are only 8 tracks in total, so career mode is short. You can finish a full season in about half an hour with 2-lap races, or stretch it to an hour with 5 laps. Go for the full 100% race length though, and you're looking at several days of playtime. There are also practice and qualifying sessions, but unless you're chasing first place, you can safely skip them. The game tries to balance between sim and arcade, but it doesn't quite nail either. You can see the Simcade ambition, but the physics, handling, and qualifying system feel disjointed. It's got that Ridge Racer spirit, but the riding mechanics lean too far into awkward realism without the payoff. There's not a ton of content beyond repeating career mode to climb the team ladder and reach the top tier bikes. It's fun in short bursts, but the physics hold it back. Honestly, if the handling was closer to Tourist Trophy, this could have been a much better experience. This might be a familiar name to some MotorStorm fans. Sony's off-road racing series known for its chaotic mix of vehicle types all thrown together in one race. Everything you'd want from an off-road racer is here. Speed, adrenaline, carnage, and plenty of ragdoll crashes. The series lived mostly on the PS3, with MotorStorm RC later hitting the Vita, but Arctic Edge is a bit of an oddball. It wasn't developed by Evolution Studios, the team behind the main games, but by big studios. Even stranger, it's the only MotorStorm title that never got a PS3 release, instead launching exclusively on PSP in 2009 and later ported to PS2. That makes it one of the last PS2 games to be made, and the only one built specifically for PSP first. Pretty weird situation overall, especially considering this was the third game in the series after the two PS3 titles. As for the game itself, it's actually really fun, which is exactly what you expect from MotorStorm. The easiest way to describe it is like Dirt 1 or Dirt 2, but way more extreme. Handling simple despite the off-road setting, with each vehicle type feeling distinct. Bikes are twitchy, four-wheelers understeer more, and heavy rigs feel sluggish but powerful. You can check each vehicle's stats before racing. Handling is the most important one, while durability is mostly about avoiding walls. Even if you crash, respawning is instant, so it never kills the momentum. Speed and acceleration matter too, but the boost system is the real star. You can push it until it overheats, and managing that risk is half the fun. Races feature up to 10 vehicles from different categories, which makes things chaotic at least from the first lap. The AI is a bit too easy though. You'd have to mess up pretty badly not to leave them behind by lap 2. Track design helps keep things interesting. Each course has multiple routes, higher paths that are faster but riskier, and lower ones that are safer but slower. It's kind of like Sonic level design, where skilled players can take the high road for speed. Most tracks are set in icy, snow-covered mountains, but the ramps, quarter pipes, and makeshift platforms give the game its own identity. Progression's straightforward. You can tackle events in any order thanks to the score and star system. Each event limits which vehicle type you can use, so it's worth checking which one fits your playstyle. Completing events earns points to unlock new body parts and vehicle variants. Star points act as optional challenges, stuff like beating time records or staying in first for a set duration. They're easy to grab but add a nice layer of replayability. Most events are standard races, with a few variations sprinkled in. It can get a bit repetitive, but the gameplay's solid enough to carry it. Compared to the PS2 port, the PSP version actually has more features. Photo mode, custom soundtracks, online multiplayer, and time trial leaderboards. The PS2 version trades those for split-screen multiplayer. It's a rare case when the handheld version is the definitive one. Arctic Edge was built for PSP first, and it shows. It runs great, feels complete, and even today, it's worth playing through emulation.
Hello there! You have successfully made it halfway into the video. Good job! This here is more to serve as a break for you to maybe get some food, or in my case, get some coffee from my Yugoslavia mug. I kind of want to show the Yugoslavia mug. While watching this video, you might be thinking to yourself, why haven't we really gone in depth with most of the games? And simply due to how many games there are on the PSP. Like this entire video you're watching has over 80 plus games, and it's 3 hours long. Now imagine if we went super in depth with every single one of those games. This video would be at least 6 or 7 hours. No, it's not. I'm not saying it because of the meme. I'm genuinely saying it. It would be either 6 or 7 hours fully. And both me and you know, nobody's gonna watch 7 hours of PSP shit. So it might be a little bit less info on some of the games, but it's good enough to give you a rough gist of what the game is about. This video so far has been 3 months in the making, so if I can ask for a small favor from you, a like and a subscribe to help push this video into the algorithm would mean a lot. My idea originally was that if this video does truly well on the channel, to do something like this for another console, maybe like the Nintendo DS or a Wii. If that's something you'd like to see in the near future, then a like and subscribe will help out a lot. And yeah, that's enough for the short break. Hope you got your food and drinks, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the video.
A bit more off-road racing this time, but with a motocross twist. MTX Mototrax features none other than the Travis Pastrana. And fun fact, the original name was supposed to be Travis Pastrana's Pro Moto X. That explains the partnership and his major role in the game. It fits right in with that early 2000s wave of extreme sports titles tied to real pros like Tony Hawk's Pro Skater or Dave Mirra's BMX Challenge. The original release came out on PS2, Xbox, and PC in 2004, with the PSP version arriving 2 years later. Unfortunately, that handheld port got mixed reviews, and I'll get to why in a bit. The game has the usual off-road racing features, so if you played anything similar, you'll feel right at home. You can jump, perform tricks, and handle terrain in similar ways. Being on two wheels changes the dynamic though. Bikes are faster and more agile around corners. You'll learn the basics in Pastrana's backyard, which doubles as a tutorial. It's actually one of the better ones I've seen. Short, clear, and straight to the point. From there you can jump into events like Supercross, which takes place in stadium circuits, or Motocross, which uses larger outdoor tracks, starting in the 125cc league and moving up as you win, unlocking upgraded bikes along the way. Money's earned by winning races, so stunts don't really matter much during events, though you can still pull them off since the game's pretty forgiving about crashes. The goal is simple. Finish first. If you don't, your manager won't let you move on to the next league. They're actually one of the highlights of the career mode, reacting to your performance with different comments and helping you land sponsorships. Sponsors give extra payouts and let you buy gear from shops, though prices are steep. One odd system here is that your rider's gear depends entirely on which sponsor you're signed with. It's the only part of customization that evolves as you progress, but it's a bit restrictive. Then there's the freestyle mode where stunts matter most, but it's locked behind a wheelie test. And no matter how much I tried, it just wouldn't work. But it's a major roadblock.
Stop right there, criminal scum.
Everything else works fine, so it's strange that this one test breaks progression for freestyle events. It's a shame because the racing itself is arguably better than most off-road sports racers on PSP. The AI can be inconsistent, swinging between total pushovers and aggressive bullies, but the core gameplay is solid. If not for that wheelie bug, MTX Mototrax could have easily been one of the best motocross experiences on the platform. Now we're stepping into the MX vs ATV franchise, and honestly, I didn't even realize there was this whole rivalry between two-wheeled and four-wheeled off-road racing until now. The first title we're looking at is MX vs ATV Unleashed on the Edge, and compared to the other games in the genre, it's really simple. Maybe a bit too simple? There's no proper career mode here. Progression just comes from finishing single events in single-player mode. There's an economy system, but it's kind of weird. Most of the bikes don't seem to differ much beyond visuals. You just go through each race, classification, and league one by one. The neat part though is that you can customize how each race behaves. Things like lap count, number of opponents, or whether you want the event to feature only MX bikes, only ATVs, or a mix of both. It's a nice touch for variety. Handling's even simpler than in other off-road games, which makes it easy to pick up, but not very deep. Bikes are more agile, while ATVs feel faster early on, but have quirks like slight input delay when steering. For some reason, landing can eject your driver even when you hit the ground just fine. I get that it's supposed to encourage mastering preloading and jump timing, but it ends up feeling confusing and inconsistent. It makes sense if bad landings cause it, but not when everything looks fine. Just like Mototrax, you don't need to pull off tricks during races that are reversed with freestyle events. Freestyle is where all the stunt action happens, with goals based on scoring, combos, or following specific trick sequences. It's mostly fine until you realize every stunt gives the same score, no matter how long or complex it is, and repeating tricks lowers your score, so the balance feels off. Long, risky stunts give less rewards, while short ones are safer and just as valuable. That said, freestyle events are still the best way to earn cash. Stunt scores pay out way more than regular races, and you'll need that money because even basic outfits and bikes are pricey. I'm kinda torn on this one. The simplicity should make it accessible, easy to learn, low barrier to entry, but then random design choices like the landing logic and stunt and balance add unnecessary frustration. It feels like the devs wanted to make a casual off-road racer, but someone on the team decided to sprinkle in artificial difficulty just for the sake of it. So maybe the other MX vs ATV games could improve on Unleashed, right? After all, there are 3 of them on PSP. Next up is MX vs ATV Reflex, and it actually looks promising at first. The intro cinematics are great, the presentation feels polished, and then everything falls apart. Gameplay wise, this one's extremely scuffed compared to Unleashed. Let's start with the tutorial. It's nice to see a proper tutorial feature, something you rarely get in these kinds of games. But once you start, the controls are absolutely bizarre. Accelerate is still X, but braking, not square. That's the clutch now. The brake is on circle, which is just awkward. Think about how your thumb naturally rests on X and square in most racing games from this era. Now imagine having to stretch it over to circle every time you need to slow down. It's uncomfortable to say the least. And it gets worse. The analog stick doesn't steer, it controls the camera. Steering is locked to the D-pad, and there's no way to change it. The tutorial doesn't even tell you what buttons to press. It just shows demo footage with no instructions, like a replay reel. So yeah, first impressions, not great. At least there's a proper career mode this time, with one-on-one boss battles against big names, but the handling is way too sensitive. Steering with the D-pad makes it even worse. You'll constantly overcorrect after corners. On the bright side, the random ejection issue from Unleashed is gone. Your rider is basically glued to the bike now, unless the AI decides to crash right on top of you. Speaking of which, the AI is a nightmare, rubber banding like crazy and sometimes completely oblivious to your presence. The new penalty system doesn't help either, instantly punishing you for cutting corners even slightly. If the penalty goes above 1 second, the race is already settled. Each event gives different rewards based on placement, so finishing first is always ideal. Freestyle events return too, but they're much more faster paced. You could only pull 3 trick combos per run, rated on execution, variety, and style. This is where the new QTE system comes in. If you're about to fall, a prompt appears to save you from crashing. It even triggers mid-trick during landings, which is actually a great addition. Unfortunately, the awful button layout and lack of tutorial clarity means you'll constantly lose points for variety, because who even knows which button triggers which tricks beyond triangle. It's frustrating because Reflex introduces a lot of genuinely good ideas, proper progression, QTE saves, better durability, but buries them under bad design choices. Digging deeper though, this seems to be a problem specific to the PSP and DS versions. The PS3, Xbox 360, and PC versions of this game play somewhat differently. Some of these issues likely come from a poor porting job. The limited button layout likely forced these bizarre control decisions, leading to this cluster of confusion. The next and final game in the series is MX vs ATV Untamed, meant to serve as a sequel to Unleashed and its PSP port On the Edge. The super twitchy steering that plagued later games might have actually started here. It's incredibly sensitive and hard to manage, though at least the default control layout is normal this time. Still, it's immediately noticeable how different this PSP port feels compared to the console versions. Instead of a structured career mode with events spread across different regions, progression now happens through several open map areas. You can find different event types scattered around, but most of them are just races. The problem is, these open maps are mostly empty. There's not much to explore or interact with. It's honestly faster and more practical to just use the menu to start events directly. That emptiness kind of sums up the whole game. It's so rough that I didn't even bother mentioning the other vehicle types included in these games. They require way too much grinding to unlock, and I'm not going through the slog that is Reflex and Untamed's PSP career modes just to get them. So yeah, this is a franchise that got completely butchered in its PSP ports. If you want the real MX vs ATV experience, just play the main console versions of PS2, PS3, Xbox, or PC. They are miles better in every way. Moving on, we've got NASCAR for the PSP. Yes, the title is just NASCAR, but it's actually a port of NASCAR 07 from the PS2 and Xbox. And honestly, this game surprised me. It's packed with interesting ideas, especially in its career mode, which, given EA's track record at the time, isn't too shocking. First off, this isn't strictly about stock car racing. There are 3 different car classifications and 4 championship leagues across the game and career mode. It's structured in a way that gives players multiple single-player options to tackle, where you pick a league and customize your race settings, from short 10-lap sprints to full-length hundreds of laps marathons. Then there's Dodge Challenges, which puts you in the seat of real drivers during historical race moments. The presentation here is great.
Casey at the MB&A Bass Pro Shops 500 at Atlanta. You had a strong car. Going into turn 3, though, a couple guys took you out. What happened?
It looked like Reed Sorensen got nervous and spun himself out, and I had nowhere to go but run into him at that point. So Just disappointing at that point for our Dodge dealer's car.
Now, that's always been a strong track for you. It damaged the car, ruined your day. What do you think? Do you think these guys can make it through the accident?
I think some of them may be able to. I don't know. I wasn't good enough to do it, but let's see if you guys can. I think you can.
Teaching you how to handle pack racing, avoid carnage, and use drafting to climb positions. Next are the speedster challenges, which are more straightforward, testing your understanding of overtaking, drafting, and blocking. They're fine, but not as engaging as the Dodge ones. The real highlight though is the flight to the top mode, the game's custom career experience. You start at the bottom in the modified Wheelin' series and work your way up to the Nextel Cup. At first glance, it looks like a standard sim career, but dig deeper and you'll find some genuinely unique mechanics. Your driving style actually affects how the world perceives you. Drive dirty, ram opponents, wall ride, cause chaos, and you'll make rivals who might even confront you after races and short cutscenes. It's rare to see that kind of physical representation of rivalry in racing games, but it goes further. Your reputation determines whether you're seen as a hero or a heel. The perception affects your popularity, team offers, and even merchandise sales. Yes, merch sales. It's wild. I've never seen another sim racer tie your behavior to fan engagement and income like this. You can even buy out teams and become both driver and owner, a level of depth that feels way ahead of its time. The fact that EA nailed this system back in 2007 is kind of insane. Why don't more modern sim racers do this? The driving itself is simple, not bad, just functional. The physics aren't groundbreaking, but they work even with altered track design. I'd actually recommend skipping qualifying altogether. Even on veteran difficulty, getting pole position makes races too easy. You can't just go flat out either. Some tracks are tiny with sharp corners that demand careful pacing. Thankfully, track variety is solid, mixing traditional ovals with city circuits and fictional layouts that occasionally lets you turn right for once. Performance-wise, the PSP struggles a bit. On certain tracks and car classes, the frame rate can really dip, so if you want the smoothest experience, the PS2 or Xbox versions are the better bet. Still, NASCAR on PSP is impressive. I went in expecting a dull, repetitive stock car racer and ended up finding a career system that feels revolutionary even nearly 20 years later. It's one of those games that quietly did something special before anyone else caught on. With the explosive rise of Need for Speed during the Y2K street racing era, EA started expanding the franchise across every platform imaginable. It makes sense. Need for Speed has always been a multi-platform series since the very beginning. Even the first game was released on multiple consoles and PC. By the time the black box era rolled around, the series was everywhere. PS2, Xbox, GameCube, PC, portable consoles, and even Java phones for some reason. But since Black Box was juggling annual releases, most of these ports were handled by different studios. That's why they share similar outlines but differ wildly in design and execution. One of those ports is Need for Speed Underground Rivals, developed by Team Fusion, a division of EA Canada, the same studio that created the original Need for Speed back in the 90s. Gameplay-wise, it's clearly based on Underground 1. The handling feels familiar and the track design carries the same vibe, though with noticeable differences. Progression, however, is completely unique. Instead of following a linear tier system like Underground 1 or 2, each race type has its own progression path. You can pick whichever event category you want to clear first with no need to follow a set order. The game modes borrow heavily from Underground 2, with additions like Drift and Street Cross. You've also got the usual circuit, drag, and knockout events. Nitrous Run, a time trial where you pass through gates to extend time and refill nitrous, testing speed and precision. Rally Relay, a rare mode where you switch between two cars each lap, forcing you to maintain multiple setups. Customization is what you expect from a PSP port, simplified but still functional. Compared to the console versions, most of the flashy visual options are gone. There's no star rating system, so visuals are purely cosmetic. Individual body kits are replaced by full sets, decals are simplified, but you can now add custom lettering to your windows, which is a neat touch. Performance upgrades remain straightforward and easy to manage. Eventually, you'll face the boss events, each tied to a specific race type, kind of like the Pro Street Kings. Beat them in their speciality and you'll unlock their car, complete with upgrades and unique liveries. They look great even with the PSP's graphical limitations. Underground Rivals is a simple, straightforward racer, much closer to Underground 1 in spirit, but with its own creative twists. It's got enough unique ideas to stand out, and honestly, it's worth trying just to see how it reinterprets the formula. The portable ports keep coming with each annual Need for Speed release, and next up is Most Wanted, or rather, Most Wanted 510, as it's titled here to differentiate from the console versions. Still developed by Team Fusion, this game carries over a lot of mechanics from Underground Rivals, so handling and customization feels familiar, but progression takes a different route, mimicking the main Most Wanted's Blacklist system, just without the open world. That means the career mode follows a similar structure, but there's no story or plot at all. The pacing's much faster, which works well for handheld play, though it sacrifices the narrative hook between you, the Blacklist members, and Cross. Even the Blacklist cars have been changed, some understandably due to roster differences, but others have swapped liveries for no clear reason. Event variety's been scaled down too, mostly because of the addition of police. The heat level system builds up as you race, increasing intensity the faster and riskier you drive. It's a solid idea on paper, but the execution's rough. Unlike the console versions, escaping cops here is almost impossible. The only way to reduce heat is by driving cleanly, but that barely offsets how quickly it rises. So ironically, the better you race, the more punishing the game becomes. That makes sense in theory, but it just feels annoying. Cops end up being more of a nuisance than a gameplay layer, as they rubber band and torpedo themselves towards you and just you. AI opponents only get affected by the roadblocks where they can actually end up busted. There are dedicated modes for pursuit though, tuner takedowns where you play as a cop, and heat challenges where you try to reach a specific heat level before the timer runs out without getting busted. The latter seems harmless at first, but it's probably the reason the heat system feels so broken. It's like the entire cop mechanic was built around that mode and then slapped onto everything else. Combine that with rubber banding cops who love to torpedo straight into you, and it gets messy fast. Honestly, this one leaves a sour taste. It tries too hard to replicate the console's experience, but ends up appearing half-baked. The ambition's there, but the execution isn't. It's not outright bad, just painfully mid. Solid foundation, but frustrating details. Underground Rivals feels tighter and more cohesive by comparison. It really feels like the developers took the criticism of Most Wanted 510 to heart, because Carbon Own the City fixes almost everything that went wrong before. In fact, I'd say this is easily the best Need for Speed game on PSP. The gameplay's solid, still built on Underground Rivals' foundation, but with a new crew system, better balanced than the console version, fresh event types, and an original story told through stylish comic-style illustrations. The story follows your character's search for answers after your brother's death 6 months earlier. I won't spoil it, but trust me, it's full of twists and reveals that get pretty wild. The narrative drives everything you do, racing through territories, tracking down former members of your brother's crew, and uncovering who was involved in that fateful race. So it's a twist on the whodunit mystery that the main game tried to do. Along the way, you recruit new crew members, ex-members of the Lucky Sevens, and other racers looking for better leadership. They don't really have the car class tiers or types anymore, so each crew is not tied to the whole tuner, muscle, and exotic restrictions, letting them create more crews in the process. Just like the console version, you can customize your crew from logo and color scheme to visual details on each member's car. You can make everyone match with a unified look or let them keep their personal styles. Crew roles have been completely reworked too. Instead of blockers, drafters, and scouts, we now have brawlers, drafters, and assassins. Brawlers act as offensive blockers, ramming opponents ahead of you. Drafters still help with slipstream boosts but feel more magnetic, likely to fit the different physics. Assassins drop spike strips to take out rivals, though they can hit you too. Scouts were removed probably because of the new open area events, and blockers were reworked into brawlers for what I'm assuming to be better consistency. You can bring up to 2 crew members per race, each assigned to a button for quick commands, so you can always have someone on the offensive and another as a drafter to push through the battlegrounds. Another thing to note is the crew members are always going to drive in formation with you, so they're equipped with an insane rubber band to catch up. Each member also has individual levels and XP gains based on your performance in events, using a similar detection from the heat system, so unlike Most Wanted, we actually get rewarded for driving fast and clean this time around. Event types are similar to Most Wanted 510, but adapted for the crew system. Instead of escaping cops or chasing racers, you're fighting rival crews for territory or triggering gang wars. It's a cool concept, though crew takedowns can be a bit RNG heavy. Enemy spawns are limited to 3 at any time, so they aren't always spawning close enough for the time limits. Each event can be easy access through the menus, or I guess if you want some exploration, through the open world free roam. The only thing missing is the iconic canyon duels. More noticeably, the map feels familiar. About 60% of it is repurposed from Rockport. It threw me off at first, but after checking, even parts of Most Wanted 510's map were actually based on Underground 2's Bayview. It's just more obvious here because of the full free roam and visible map layout, so Team Fusion had basically repurposed older assets from Black Box and remodeled them into this brand new environment. Carbon Owned the City feels like a culmination of everything Team Fusion learned from the previous ports. It's fast, stylish, and surprisingly deep for a handheld racer. It's not just a good PSP Need for Speed, it's one of the best racing experiences on the system, period. But with every peak comes the downhill trend, and for Team Fusion, that starts with Pro Street. Unlike their previous ports, this one doesn't feature Palmet City at all. Instead, it uses closed official tracks from the console version, including the Nevada Desert. The gameplay still retains the core system from Underground Rivals, so handling and physics feel familiar. Shared mechanics like the Drafter's boost from Carbon are now universal. You can trigger drafting power whenever you slipstream behind opponents. The car classification system from Carbon also returns, though slightly reworked. Now we've got tuners, muscle, sport, and super classes. Thankfully, there's no tier system, so you can stick with a few favorites and keep upgrading them. Unfortunately, this is where things start to fall apart. Body kit customization is gone. Not even spoilers or carbon hoods remain. You're left with colors, small decals, and window tints. Every car looks stock until you unlock boss vehicles. I guess that's the trade-off for finally getting visual car damage. They probably didn't have time to model damage for multiple body kits, which explains the stripped down customization. Through the career, you'll earn driver rating EXP, dictated by your chosen persona. It sounds interesting, but it's really just a difficulty preset. The easiest mode gives full assists, while the hardest one removes them, though even no assists still includes subtle auto-centering on long straights. It's not noticeable during cornering, but it can mess you up by adding unwanted steering input. These assist settings also affect your earnings and rating progression, with some events disabling full assists entirely. Races take place across 13 closed tracks, each with multiple layouts depending on the event type. Circuit sprints and lap knockouts return, while others like gate knockout, speed trap, and time trial are tweaked versions of modes from Most Wanted and Carbon. Some events unlock new cars or give them away for free, while others require specific purchases. The game's nice enough to provide cars for each classification, so you're not forced to buy new ones constantly. Unfortunately, there's not much else to it. Pro Street follows its console counterpart's premise well enough, but there's no hook, no kings, no rival characters, nothing to chase. You just race through events until you're declared a pro, and that's it. The lack of visual customization makes everything feel limited, with every car looking stock. It's not terrible, it's just plain. I wouldn't say it's as bad as Most Wanted 510, since there's no broken cop system here, but it's definitely not as engaging as Carbon. I'd put it on the same level as Underground Rivals. Solid enough, but whether it holds up for long play sessions depends entirely on your personal taste. By this point, Undercover was already known as one of the more perplexing entries in the franchise, mostly due to EA's tight development constraints. The main version suffered from awkward storytelling, technical issues, and missed gameplay potential, and the ports didn't fare much better. The PS2 and Wii versions even reused Most Wanted's assets to speed up development while trying to keep the core story intact. So for the PSP version, they actually improved on that experience quite a bit. This one uses Underground Rivals' core system, so expect similar physics and mechanics to Most Wanted 510 and Carbon Owned the City. The big new addition is the zone meter, which builds up as you drive fast and dangerously. It boosts both nitrous and speed breaker regeneration, but the catch is you can't hit walls. This mechanic encourages constant speed breaker and nitrous use, creating an intense sense of speed that rivals Pro Street's speed events. Mastering zone becomes crucial for domination bonuses and 100% completion. Progression follows the same undercover cop storyline as the main game. The same characters are present, and you are tasked with infiltrating the street racing scene to take down a criminal syndicate. Each area acts as a pseudo-territory, with multiple race events to clear before unlocking new regions. It's a straightforward structure, but it works well for handheld pacing. The story beats are mostly identical to the console version, including the targets you'll face later on. Event types cover familiar ground, circuits, sprints, knockouts, and checkpoint time trials, plus direct adaptations from Undercover like delivery jobs, highway battles, and outrun. There are also pursuit-based modes tied to bounty progression, like Escape, Cost Estate, and Cop Takedown, which unlock customization and new cars. The police mechanics are better than Most Wanted 510, though still imperfect. Escape events suffer from extreme rubber banding, turning them into coin flips between frustrating and trivial. Meanwhile, Cost Estate and Cop Takedown force you to wait for timers even after hitting your goals, making pacing uneven. You can rack up extra bounty during downtime, but the rewards are minimal compared to completion bonuses. Customization returns to form here back to 510's system, with cars and upgrades locked behind bounty reputation. Body kits make a comeback, undoing the removals from Pro Street. Personally, I find this version of Undercover better than the main console release. The same for its PS2 version. The physics and mechanics feel more cohesive, and the zone system adds a genuine skill layer. The cops are no longer a complete nuisance like before, and while some event pacing is off, the overall experience feels tighter and more rewarding. For the final PSP Need for Speed port, Need for Speed Shift isn't a black box title, but it still received a PSP port, and if this is your only exposure to the Shift series, things get weird fast. This version differs massively from the original console release. Unlike previous PSP ports, this one was handled by EA UK, specifically Bright Light Studio, which explains a lot of the design choices made here. Instead of being a direct adaptation of the SimCade experience, this version feels more like a spiritual successor to Pro Street. The gameplay leans heavily towards fast-paced arcade racing rather than simulation. The change in developers means they ditched the Underground Rivals core entirely. In fact, the handling feels ripped straight out of a Burnout game. Cars drift effortlessly, turn with exaggerated precision, and even share similar crash animations. It's a bit uncanny. Of course, don't expect takedowns, as the one Burnout mechanic they left out. Characters from Pro Street return, including Ryo Watanabe and the other Kings, now reimagined as part of the 10 bosses you'll face. Career progression is simplified. You move through festival-style event trails, each with its own set of races. Win enough events and you'll trigger a boss challenge, and you have to beat them to earn their car. There's no economy system here. Cars are unlocked through race days and boss victories. Most event types return: circuits, sprints, lap knockouts, speed traps, and drift, though not all of them land perfectly. Knockouts being lap-based hurts pacing, and drifting has a strange multiplier system that only activates in designated corners. These zones can be inconsistent, so sometimes you'll have to awkwardly drift in a straight line just to keep your combo alive. Other modes include Toge, a 1v1 sprint race, and Grand Prix, which are back-to-back circuit events. Difficulty-wise, the game's odd. The AI is usually easy and rarely catches up unless you make big mistakes. There are no difficulty settings, which makes things feel repetitive. That might be intentional though, since upgrades are tied to the new loyalty system, essentially car-specific EXP. It's unclear how much you earn per race. Sometimes it's a sliver, sometimes a full bar. Each car has unique unlockables, tire upgrades for grip or drift, engine boosts for speed, and cosmetic additions like decals and body kits. But grinding each car individually gets tedious, especially since liveries are the only customization available by default. Overall, Shift on PSP is fun enough, but the pacing is uneven. Some race days fly by, while others drag on for minimal progress. At its core though, it's still enjoyable, despite being a little bit strange. And honestly, it's kind of funny how this game unintentionally feels like a sequel to Pro Street, with every named character now going full pro racing after the events of that game. That kinda makes this more interesting than the main version. Now, if I have to rank every PSP Need for Speed game, Carbon on the City sits at the top, Undercover follows right behind, Underground Rivals and Pro Street share the middle, Shift is weird but close to Pro Street, and Most Wanted 510, well, that one's still at the bottom. Now that we're done with the Need for Speed series, we can take a breather and look at something a bit more casual. So I picked this random drag racing game for what I'm assuming is around 2007. It's NHRA Drag Racing Countdown to the Championship, and it's obscure enough that there's barely any information online, just a few eBay listings and some raw gameplay footage. To put it simply, this is a sim career take on the NHRA drag racing scene, featuring 5 different vehicle classes and some pretty strange mechanics. The game actually tries to teach you the basics of real drag racing from the burnout phase, staging, and the actual race itself, along with multiple qualifying sessions before elimination brackets. It's a neat idea, but the execution, well, it's janky. You can feel how cheaply made it is from the weird stuff you can do. For example, if you get disqualified, you can literally roadblock your opponent and make them crash instead of being kicked out immediately when the red light shows up. Before each burnout period, you get a short window to tune your car. Then the race starts, and and honestly, I have no idea what the main qualification criteria are. Is it time, speed, both? Sometimes a faster run wins, sometimes it doesn't. It's completely inconsistent. Between races, damage and payouts are tallied, and for some reason, you can replace your team principal before jumping straight into the next cup. It all moves way too fast. So fast that I'm left with more questions than answers. Like, what's the actual button layout? Why does the game sometimes let me race normally, then randomly cap my revs so low that the engine blows? It's just weird. The game desperately needs to slow down and explain itself. As far as I can tell, there's no car purchasing system either. Restarting the career just drops you into a random vehicle. In a way, it feels like a super cheap project where the devs built the racing mechanics first, then realized they only had about $100 left to finish the rest of the game. Speaking of quick action, the next game on the list is Outrun 2006 Coast to Coast. For those unaware, Outrun is an arcade racing series developed by Sega back in the 80s, often cited as one of the legendary pillars of the genre. It inspired countless arcade racers and even modern indie titles decades later. The 2006 remake was published by Sega and developed by none other than Sumo Digital. Nowadays, Sumo is known for fun, fast-paced titles, but back then, Outrun 2006 was only their second project, and honestly, they nailed it. The game's based on Outrun 2 and its SP version, both included as extra content. The driving feels just as thrilling and fluid as the original arcade experience. Fast drifts, smooth corners, and that unmistakable sense of speed. You pick your route, rack up points, and chase that perfect run. The main attraction here is the Coast to Coast mode, featuring a mix of race events and girlfriend requests. Races are short, compact versions of Outrun's classic mode, featuring predetermined routes against AI opponents. Simple but satisfying. Girlfriend requests, on the other hand, add a fun twist. Each route comes with specific challenges, and you'll need to average at least an A rank to unlock the next girlfriend to drive with. These tasks range from avoiding traffic, passing cars, drifting, collecting coins, smashing through obstacles, or even driving in specific lanes. They're creative and add variety, though the randomness can get annoying. Later routes sometimes trigger special requests, meaning you might have to replay multiple times just to get the right challenge set for full completion. The grind doesn't stop there. Coast to Coast limits your starting cars to just 2, with the rest locked behind the in-game shop. You earn C2C miles to unlock new cars, but they're hard to come by. Even clearing a full race league barely earns enough for one. And then there's the shop itself, selling not just cars, but stages, music tracks, extra goals, and even car colors. Honestly, I don't know why colors are sold separately. They should have just unlocked automatically when you buy the car. Despite the grind, Outrun 2006 still delivers that classic arcade joy. You can hop into Coast to Coast mode for some casual driving fun, or just enjoy the pure Outrun experience. If you've ever played the Outrun minigame in Yakuza, this is basically the full version, modernized beautifully while staying true to the series' legacy. Sumo Digital really did justice to Sega's classics here. Still in the realm of arcade racers, we've got the mascot racing scene featuring none other than Pac-Man. The game is pretty identical between its multiple ports on PS2, GameCube, PC, and PSP. I'll be blunt, this game is basically a Mario Kart clone. Almost every mechanic feels lifted or derivative drifting, boosting, jumping, even the power-ups almost behave identically. That said, there are a few original ideas sprinkled in. For example, the Guardian Angel system. Fill up the bar by drifting and then activate it to block incoming attacks. There's also the gated shortcut system where you collect fruit-shaped keys to unlock special paths mid-race. And the ultimate mechanic, which turns every opponent into vulnerable ghosts you can chomp through after collecting enough pellets. Normally, these features need to be activated by driving over their paths, so mastering the controls becomes essential. Character stats are divided by weight class. Light racers have high acceleration below top speed, mediums are balanced, and heavies trade acceleration for raw speed. Track design surprisingly good, with multiple paths and clever layouts that often tie into the gated shortcuts. Pad placement feels deliberate too, constantly testing your awareness and timing. That design philosophy even carries over to the battle mode, which works like most kart racers of the era, but with a completely different item pool. Unfortunately, it's pretty unbalanced as some items can obliterate opponents in one hit, while others barely do anything. Worse, your kills can be stolen by other players or AI at any time. Other modes include Time Attack, which is straightforward, Letter Hunt where you collect letters spelling Pac-Man across track sections, and Clockbusters, a tougher, gimmicky version of Time Trial. Overall, it's a simple kart racer that leans heavily on RNG over skill, which, to be fair, is par for the course for Mario Kart-inspired games. Even with technical mechanics like Guardian Angel or gated shortcuts, one bad blue bomb can ruin your entire race. Still, I'd say this is a good game. As a PSP title, it's definitely above average, but is it better than the PS2 version? That's where things get tricky. The PS2 version looks better visually, but the PSP version offers more content with extra characters and tracks, so depending on what you value more, either version has its own edge. Despite the name, Pocket Racers isn't as generic as it sounds. The game kicks off with a very late 90s, early 2000s 3D cutscene, a bunch of young adults partying, when suddenly this weird emo guy shows up and vaporizes everyone, turning them into RC cars. Apparently he's called the Soul Master, and he forces you to race for the souls of these partygoers in RC style events. Why? No clue. The cutscene doesn't explain anything beyond that premise. If you're familiar with games like Twisted Metal, the whole dark magic meets racing setup might ring a bell. You start by picking from several RC cars, each with a few color and decal options. Most need to be unlocked by winning races in Soul Challenge tiers. The catch: finish last and the Soul Master devours one soul, meaning you're stuck with a limited life system throughout the career. Second or third place doesn't earn anything, only first lets you progress. Winning races rewards soul gems, and you can also collect soul fragments hidden around tracks. These are tucked behind shortcuts, alternate paths, or physics-based props scattered everywhere. You can ram into them or use the lightning power-up to move obstacles, create roadblocks, or reveal hidden items. It's a neat idea, but it exposes one of the game's biggest flaws. Car stats barely matter. Whether you pick the lightest or heaviest RC car, you still get punted sideways by every obstacle, and you'd better get used to that, because the rest of the game doubles down on chaos. Power-ups like the Freeze Orb or Fireball are lethal and spammable, and the AI loves pit maneuvering you thanks to the twitchy RC physics. Normally that would just be annoying, but with a limited life system, it's brutal. 5 bad races and your entire campaign could be over. It's one of those interesting premise, neat ideas, flawed execution situations. The game could have been much better with stronger defensive mechanics. Right now, the short-lived shield pickup is all you've got. Still, Pocket Racers is a fascinating attempt to add a dark twist to the RC racing subgenre. If you can survive the frustration long enough to reach the end, maybe you'll finally uncover the Soul Master's motivation and why he decided to turn a house party into a supernatural demolition derby. Ridge Racer made its debut on the PSP simply as Ridge Racer. No number, no subtitle, just the name. That's intentional because this entry is essentially a celebration of the entire series up to 2005. It's a remaster that pays homage to everything from the original 1993 Ridge Racer to Rage Racer and beyond. So if you're a longtime fan, most of the tracks will feel instantly familiar, just polished up with new visuals. The same goes for its soundtrack selection as well, split into several different disc categories. Gameplay wise, it's classic Ridge Racer through and through. High-speed drift-heavy racing. Still very simple and clean as well. That DNA is still well preserved, even down to the very simplistic controls. This game genuinely only needs an accelerator and brake for it to function. The only other buttons available are for camera settings and a new feature. The big addition here is nitrous boosts, earned through drifting. To complement that, the old drift versus grip car split is gone. Every car now is a drift car, divided into 3 categories: standard with balanced drift control, mild, easier to enter and exit drifts but slower overall, and dynamic, offering wider drift angles that demand more steering precision. Unlocking cars and tracks works much like before. Beat the World Tours to earn new vehicles and routes. Instead of one big tournament, there are dozens of smaller tours, each unlocking fresh content. Cars are split into several classes, which explains why so many are locked early on. Depending on the tour, they're unlocked in specific orders, but commonly you'll unlock the first 3 cars of class 2 and 3 before expanding on them again. There's also the custom tour system for those that want to race only on specific tracks. Personally, my main Ridge Racer experience was with Type 4, so it felt odd not seeing team selections or car brands here. Many racers use identical cars, which takes away a bit of personality. There's also a slight issue with car size. These newer models feel bulkier, and on older, narrow tracks, corners can get tight when multiple cars are packed together. It's not game-breaking, but it can be really annoying when all that momentum disappears. Still, the game's solid. There are 46 world tours in total, packed with content and at least 7 cars per class. Even if most of it is remastered material, it's a lot to dig into. The only drawback is the track count, with only 12 tracks in total, each with normal and reverse layouts. Repetition can set in quickly, so it's best not to marathon the whole thing in one sitting. We're not done yet with Ridge Racer because here comes the follow-up. There's some funny business with this one. It was never officially released in North America, only in Japan, Europe, and Australia. But the real head scratcher is that this game is basically the same as the first PSP Ridge Racer, just with a few updates and a lot more content. The world tours are still here and most of the cars and tracks returned, just expanded. How much more? A lot. The track count jumps to 21, each with reverse layouts, and there are new game modes like Duel and Survival to spice things up. The car roster also balloons to 62 machines, giving you plenty to experiment with. Tour progression has been tweaked too. In the first game, clearing Class 1 tours unlock Class 2 cars, then Class 3, so you got a taste of each tier early on. This time, beating Class 1 tours unlocks alternative, slightly faster versions of Class 1 cars instead, creating a smoother, more consistent progression curve. It might just be placebo, but drift physics feel improved as well. Dynamic drift cars handle tighter and more predictably, making the game easier overall, while mild drift cars now feel closer to grip cars than ever before. The Nitrous UI also got a small but welcome upgrade. It's clearer which tank is refilling after each burst, making it easier to track your boost mid-race. All of this begs the question, why bother with the first PSP Ridge Racer when this one exists? It's hard to find a reason. Ridge Racer 2 is essentially the same game, same handling, same progression, same mechanics, but with more tracks, more cars, and better polish. It's the definitive version of PSP Ridge Racer, plain and simple. So this game is only listed as Rush, but it's actually the PSP port of LA Rush, that one racing game often cited as a Midnight Club clone with heavy hip-hop influences and Pimp My Ride. If you're familiar with the original, you'll know what to expect. Checkpoint-based street races with no preset barriers, meaning the route you take is entirely up to you. Progression is heavily tied to the story. You play as Trix Lane, a street racer who's made it to the top. Mansion, luxury cars, the whole deal. The intro cutscene sets up the key characters and stakes. A confrontation with the antagonist Liddell, and then Trix loses everything except his old junker Sylvia, the car that started his career. Your goal? Help Trix get his stuff back. That means racing through Liddell's leagues while your buddy Ty hunts down all the stolen cars across LA. Gameplay alternates between race events and car recovery missions, which keeps things fresh. Sometimes you'll even sabotage Liddell's businesses by smashing into his properties. It is sweet revenge honestly, but the game's janky. It plays like Midnight Club, but the cars are way too sensitive. One collision can send you flying sideways, and airtime physics are so floaty that your car loses all sense of mass midair. And for some reason, getting caught by cops or henchmen triggers a fail condition if your speed hits 0, even if you're reversing. Thankfully, getting busted doesn't end the race. It's more like the cops just want a quick bribe. The AI isn't too tough, which helps because the race setups can get weird. Checkpoints often don't flow naturally. You'll find yourself U-turning through alleys just to reach the next one. Despite earning tons of cash from races, there's barely anything to spend it on. Cars are mostly recovered through missions, and customization is handled automatically at West Coast Customs. They'll pimp your ride whether you like it or not. It's unclear if these upgrades improve performance or are purely visual. But hey, at least they didn't install 12 monitors, 3 Xboxes, and a jacuzzi in your Sylvia. In the end, Rush becomes a very linear experience. Race, recover cars, and repeat this until Liddell's defeated. The map of LA is split into 5 zones to mix up the scenery, but checkpoint placement still feels baffling at times. To be fair though, the game's fine. It's goofy, entertaining, and occasionally ridiculous in the best way. The cutscenes are fun, the races are serviceable, and there's enough variety in cars to keep things interesting. Although, would you rather play this on the PSP? The very low graphics often makes every car into this chrome aberration. Controls are fine at least, but it might be better to just get the other versions, whether it's PS2, Xbox, or PC versions instead of this. Since we're here, we might as well cover Pimp My Ride just in case anyone asks. But fair warning, this isn't really a standard racing game to begin with. The premise is simple enough. You pick a lucky contestant whose car is about to get pimped, then go through two phases. First is the cash collection phase, where you earn money to fund a makeover by smashing boards, doing QT, cruising, pulling off what are basically 2000s era Fortnite emotes, and collecting random pickups around the map. Don't expect these mechanics to work consistently. The cruising minigame has about 50-50 chance of even triggering. After that, you race against time and exhibit to visit different customization shops and upgrade the car to see who among you truly has the pimping spirit. Each upgrade introduces a minigame to reduce costs before the final judging phase. This game is rough. Out of every PSP title I've played for this project, it's the only one hard-locked at 25 FPS, even with developer tools. Not even Exhibit's antics can save this one. It's a mess from start to finish. For more region-locked tomfoolery, here's a weird one. Saro Getyu Pipa Saro Racer. It's part of the Ape Escape franchise, a Japanese series that's normally a mix of platforming and action-adventure. The spin-off, though, is a racing game, and unlike the mainline titles, it never saw the light of day outside Japan. So yeah, expect plenty of squiggly lines on screen throughout this footage. The premise is hilarious. Instead of driving carts, you play as one of the monkeys who's turned themselves into living speed machines. It's as bizarre as it sounds, and it leads to some truly strange gameplay design choices. You start by choosing between two machine styles. I'm not entirely sure what the difference is beyond visuals. One looks like a traditional formula style racer, the other more like a hot rod or muscle car. Gameplay is simple enough, but the gimmicks make it unique. Remember those wheel limbs? If you hold both shoulder buttons, the monkey straightens out its arms and legs, reducing drag for extra speed and access to certain shortcuts at the cost of handling. It's clever, but you'll be holding those shoulder buttons for most of the race, and on a PSP, that's not exactly comfortable. Drifting works by tapping brake while cornering, and of course, there are random power-ups to attack or defend. Unfortunately, item balance is all over the place. Bomb-type items, whether manual or homing, can stop you dead for several seconds, while things like the disco ball just make AI opponents steer erratically for a moment. Speaking of AI, they can dodge bombs with uncanny precision, making it feel like the items were designed to punish players specifically. Collisions don't help either. Bump into an opponent, and often the result is you're the one spinning out for some reason. The weirdness doesn't stop there. The game has an upgrade system, but it's mostly visual. Worse, it doesn't show what you're buying until after you've bought it, so you can easily waste money on unwanted parts. You earn cash from winning races, which is straightforward enough, but the lack of clarity makes progression messy. Overall, this game falls into the classic trap of interesting ideas, questionable execution. It's commendable for trying something different instead of being another Mario Kart clone, but the control scheme and balancing hold it back. I think that's enough silliness for now, because we're back to some proper simcade action. The SBK series, short for Superbike World Championship, was an annually developed sim racing franchise by Milestone. This entry, SBK07, is a solid representation of their early work in motorcycle racing. The game itself is fine. It's a functional simcade, maybe a bit understeery, but nowhere near as awkward as Namco's MotoGP. Races are split into multiple segments: free practice, qualifying, super pole, and the two main races. You can set lap counts as low as 1, though honestly, I wouldn't recommend spending too much time in practice or qualifying. Even on higher difficulties, the AI is pretty easy, as you can start last and still finish first within a single lap. Other activities here are challenges based on several goals, things like gated speed trap, braking limits, overtakes, skidding, and etc. Access is limited in a linear method, so you can't just jump from one challenge type to another from the get-go. Winning races earns you cards. Yes, another PSP game with collectible cards, but at least this system has some benefits. You can't really get duplicates, and the most impactful rewards are cheats, or extra riders for championship mode. All bikes are unlocked by default anyway, so these additions are more for flavor than progression. The rest of the cards are mostly promotional content, race photos, videos, and yes, some spicy extras. They're divided by type: black cards for beating challenges and developer ghost records, red cards for winning races, and gold cards for completing the full championship mode, which takes you through all 10 tracks in a single season. Beyond that, there's not much else to say. SBK07 isn't bad, it's just unremarkable. The physics are fine, the handling's fine, and everything works as expected. It's a competent simcade experience, even if nothing about it really stands out. By next year, another SBK racing game would launch, and to be honest, it's not that different from SBK 07. The core gameplay remains the same, the modes are identical, and yes, the card system is still here, functioning exactly as before. There are a few noticeable changes though. The challenge section is less linear now. You can access other categories earlier, making progression feel more flexible. The more important improvement, however, is in the handling. Bikes don't understeer nearly as much as anymore, so cornering feels smoother and more natural. It's a small change, but it makes a big difference in how the game plays. Beyond that, there's not much else to say. SBK 08 is simply a better version of SBK 07. The only potential deal breaker might be the roster and track differences. If your favorite rider from the previous season isn't here, that could be disappointing even if it's not a huge issue. Track selection also changes slightly, adding one more circuit overall, but it's still familiar territory. So what about SBK 09? Did it continue the trend of 08 or has it strayed away into different directions? It pretty much stayed the same as 08. Maybe there's a bit of tweaking in stability, so the chances of falling off is slightly higher in this iteration, but 95% of the game is pretty much the same this time. Some different teams maybe, different riders, one more track, so I guess this is the definitive edition of the series. I'd probably recommend this game if you're into motorbike focused simcades, especially 2008 and 2009 versions. They don't really have that much difference, so take your pick which to play. That said, the games definitely work fine enough in the PSP ecosystem. The controls are fine for what is necessary. Milestone would keep developing the series after, just not for the PSP system anymore, so we won't be looking into SBK X unfortunately. That's enough Simcade for now. After running through 3 similar games, I think we've earned a proper break. And who better to turn to than Sega, one of the masters of arcade racing. Enter Sega Rally Revo, a spiritual successor to the classic Sega Rally experience, though not a direct continuation. The main versions were developed by Sega's in-house studio, but the PSP port was handled by Bugbear Entertainment, the same team behind Flatout and Wreckfest. That might make you expect some carnage, but Bugbear stuck to their assignment, faithfully adapting the original game for handheld play. The result is a fast, arcadey racer with no damage system and handling that feels surprisingly close to the old Sega Rally formula. Progression, however, works differently. Instead of unlocking content through wins or achievements, it's tied to tournament scores. Each championship has a fixed number of events, which limits how much score you can earn. If one race goes wrong though, your progression slows dramatically, and that's not uncommon thanks to the AI's behavior. They're oblivious to your position and seem coated in superglue, and once they're beside you, they'll drag you straight into the wall, so mastering the handling becomes essential. That's where the game's biggest twist comes in. Unlike most rally racers that just list terrain by percentages, Sega Rally Revo features 3 distinct surfaces: tarmac, dirt, and mud, often placed side by side. Before each championship, you choose between slick, rally, or off-road tires. This turns cornering into a tactical decision. Do you aim for the apex or steer towards the surface that best fits your setup? It's a clever way to add depth to an otherwise pure arcade experience. Once you master the terrain system and learn to weave past opponents, new cars start unlocking across 3 classes: Premier, Modified, and Master. Career progression moves through Amateur, Expert, and Final difficulties, each unlocked through the same scoring system. To unlock alternate liveries, you'll need serious mileage around per car. All of this mirrors the main console versions, just with scaled down visuals and UI. Bugbear's port is impressively faithful, and the PSP version is genuinely fun to play. There's plenty of content if you're willing to grind through every championship and car unlock, plus it's the most convenient way to play today. The PS3 and Xbox 360 versions are harder to find, and the PC releases require digging through abandonware, along with whatever fan patch that might be required. So if you're after quick, satisfying arcade rally action, the PSP version of Sega Rally Revo is absolutely worth your time. We're staying in Japan for this one. Shinseki GPX Cyber Formula VS. Bit of a mouthful, but it basically translates to the new century Cyber Formula. The Cyber Formula part alone already screams futuristic, though the full title gives it that extra anime flair. The game itself is based on an anime series that ran through the 90s, but I'll be honest, this is the first time I've ever heard of it, so I can't really tell you how faithful the adaptation is. There are a few game modes here: Survival, Grand Prix, and Standard Single Race or Time Trial. The interesting part is the randomized rival selection in each race and Grand Prix. I'm not entirely sure what it changes beyond giving them boosted performance and some voice line interactions when they're nearby, but it's a neat touch. Gameplay wise, this one's pretty unique. It plays like an anti-gravity racer but with a twist. Your vehicle has multiple modes you can constantly switch between to handle different track conditions. Circuit mode is the default, increasing drag for better handling but lower speed. Rally mode kicks in for rough terrain or off-track sections. Aero mode focuses on aerodynamics for straightaways, sacrificing cornering entirely. And from aero, you can trigger turbo mode for short bursts of extreme speed. Most races demand good timing and awareness of when to switch modes, which makes the loop genuinely interesting. But there are issues. Circuit mode's handling boost can feel too abrupt, causing sudden oversteer, and drifting feels disconnected, like you're sliding without actually steering. Collisions are another headache. No matter who hits who or how, the player always loses momentum. And while you'd expect some balancing to help you catch up, the AI sometimes just rockets ahead through corners and dirt sections, like they're glued to rails. There are ways to mitigate this. Before races, you can swap tires for better grip or durability. There's also an upgrade shop, but it's pricey and grind heavy, which slows progression. It's a shame, but the concept is genuinely cool. Having different vehicle modes for different track sections feels ahead of its time. Unfortunately, the balancing's all over the place. Sometimes it's a breeze, other times the difficulty spikes out of nowhere. And since the game's entirely in Japanese, I had to rely on trial and error to figure out most of the mechanics. Now, from an adaptation of Japanese media, we visit one from the West, so out of any animated classics, a racing game based on Shrek was the last thing in my list. I mean, the setting of the movie is pretty much in a fantastical world based on parodying fairy tales. How would they adapt that into a racing game? Well, first off, I guess it's not surprising that it's basically a kart racer, but the dev team certainly took a lot of liberty to follow the kart racer formula. Instead of riding karts, every character rides a mount, may it be horses, bulls, dragons, and whatever swamp monster Shrek is riding. Instead of drifting, each mount is super agile and can jump to avoid hazards, reach shortcuts, and obtain specific item placement. That's pretty much the general core of how it feels to drive, or I guess ride, in this game. It's heavily complemented by the track design, which often features a lot of alternative paths, taking you under or above the standard height with different paths that could be slower or faster. Some paths will stress test just how well you can control the agility of each character, even if they don't have stat differences. This is also true for the hazards as well. Getting hit by any offensive items in this game rarely stops you dead. Your character will usually keep bouncing or sliding in the direction they were going primarily, which keeps the momentum and pacing of the game pretty brief. And that's where the double-edged sword comes in. The quick and consistent pacing makes the game feel pretty good to play continuously. In single player, there's only tournament, cup challenges, quick race, and time trials. The catch is, tournament is just doing each cup continuously, immediately starting the next cups without switching characters, while cup challenges are where we get to do them individually. There's no difference between doing either of them. The end result is still unlocking more cups, tracks, and new characters. There's nothing really major in quick race or time trials either, so once you beat all 8 cups, that's basically the whole content on the platter. I am pretty surprised though. I was expecting a pretty cheap movie tie-in kart racer that usually plagues this era of video game developments, but the core mechanics of this game is surprisingly pretty good. Everything flows smoothly even when things go wrong, but the very slim amount of content with almost no variety remains its biggest weakness. It's not a PSP issue either. Every other version between the PS2, GameCube, and NDS mostly have the same content and characteristics compared to this port. It's not exactly rare to see the blue blur, the fastest hedgehog alive in a racing scenario. Recently we've had Sonic Crossworlds and the legendary Sega All-Stars Racing Transformed, but a racing game where the characters don't nerf themselves by using vehicles, that's a rarity. The earliest example of that idea was the oddball Sonic R, and the only other games that follow this concept are Sonic Rivals 1 and 2, a duology that's weird in all the right ways. Developed by Backbone Entertainment, Sonic Rivals released around the same time as that one infamous mainline Sonic title. It's a 2.5D game, so basically 3D environments and stage design, but movement restricted to a side-scrolling path. It's strange seeing a Sonic game play like the classics, except now you're against another character instead of just running solo. Power-ups are scattered throughout stages, functioning differently depending on your position, and there are plenty of parkour logs. Branching paths let you go upwards or straight ahead depending on your timing. It's an interesting concept for a Sonic racer, but does it work? Well, sort of. The game only features 5 playable characters: Sonic, Knuckles, Shadow, and Silver at the start. Each have a unique special move, but they're tied to random power-ups, and aside from that, there doesn't seem to be any stat differences. The opponent's rubber banding might make you think otherwise though. Stage design follows the spirit of classic Sonic, multiple routes, verticality, and momentum-based flow, but the execution can be frustrating. The rubber banding AI constantly attacks you with no real counterplay, and respawning after failing out of bounds takes forever. The biggest issue though is the camera. It's way too close, making it nearly impossible to react to obstacles or enemies in time. You'll get blindsided by hazards or miss jumps on parkour sections constantly unless you have the map fully memorized. Outside the races, there are boss fights against Eggman. They're fun breaks from the usual gameplay, but they boil down to who can deal the most damage before the robot explodes. Story mode is required to unlock new stages, which then become available in other modes like challenge mode and cup races. Winning races, completing challenges, and finishing story chapters earn you cards. Another PSP game with collectible cards. These can unlock skins and parts for characters, though I'm not sure if online trading was ever fully implemented, as online features seem limited to multiplayer races. Overall, Sonic Rivals is a fascinating experiment, a Sonic game that tries to merge platforming with competitive racing. It's rough around the edges, but its weirdness gives it a distinct identity among Sonic spin-offs. If nothing else, it's a fun curiosity. A year later in 2007, a sequel arrived, still developed by Backbone Entertainment, and compared to the first game, this one packs significantly more content and a lot of improvements. Unfortunately, the camera still hasn't been fixed, but the rubber banding has been tuned down considerably, making races feel far more balanced. Character special moves are now charged by collecting rings instead of relying on random item boxes, which have been reduced to prevent spam. Items now serve more as tactical tools. They're useful for defense rather than constant chaos. You can even counter direct attacks from opponents with a well-timed response, adding a layer of skill that wasn't present before. There are also new alternate modes beyond the usual racing and boss battles, giving the game much more variety. Story mode is split into 4 campaigns, each featuring 2 characters since the roster has doubled, and every returning character now has a partner. Oddly though, these pairings only matter in the story. Gameplay still sticks to 1v1 races, with 4 story segments that split the characters up. Even boss stages just let you choose whichever character to play as, which makes the partnership feel more narrative than mechanical. Outside of races, there are battle stages, which range from fun to complete chaos. Regular battles are usually straightforward. Whoever lands the first knockout wins, while tag mode tends to drag on for too long. Boss fights, however, are much improved. There's now a clear win condition, and some fights are more methodical rather than just who can deal damage faster. For story enjoyers, all characters now have fully voiced dialogue, adding personality to the cutscenes. Stage design has also evolved. Parkour logs have larger visual indicators, and new mechanics demand precise timing and quick judgment calls. So even though the AI has been nerfed, the technical skill required to maintain your lead has increased, making races more engaging and occasionally tense. The card system returns earned by completing stages or meeting specific goals, and some grant special effects that make other modes more convenient, like helping locate child collectibles in free-run stages that would otherwise be blind hunts. Compared to the first game, Sonic Rivals 2 is a huge step forward. It's smoother, better balanced, and far less frustrating. The added mechanics keep you alert and reward skillful play over the relatively simple item spam. It feels like the first game again, but refined, expanded, and finally living up to its potential. Split Second stands as one of the best one-off racing titles ever published by Disney, capturing the explosive magic of Burnout and twisting it into its own high adrenaline spectacle. Most people remember the main versions on PC and the 7th gen consoles, and that makes sense. If you want pure chaos and destruction, you'd go for the version with the power to handle it, but the PSP port often gets ignored. Is that fair though? The handheld version was developed by Sumo Digital, and it plays surprisingly close to the main game with a few key differences. All the major modes are here, the tracks are intact, and the signature power play mechanic, triggering cinematic explosions and collapsing environments, is still present. However, since the game had to be scaled down, many of the dynamic cameras and flashy visual effects that defined its personality were stripped away. Even the menus were simplified to keep performance stable. Interestingly, the PSP port actually includes more content, some of it originally shown only in the early E3 demos. This includes new areas like the docks, extra set of challenge-based content related to destruction and drifting. Unfortunately, the changes done towards the handling has put the overall experience into question. There's something off about how cars steer and drift, so while the PSP version technically offers more content, the overall experience feels worse. Is it worth playing? Honestly, no. It's a fascinating adaptation, but the magic of Split Second lies in its spectacle, the explosions, the camera angles, the sheer chaos, and that's something the PSP just can't replicate. Even though I'd still say Sumo Digital does a great job at attempting to replicate a similar experience, it just falls short. So I'd probably say just stick with the PC or console versions if you want the full experience. Speaking of ports, here's another weird one. SSX On Tour. This game follows the core design of its main versions on PS2, Xbox, and GameCube, but the PSP port takes a very different approach. To make it playable on weaker hardware, the developers made some jarring choices. At its core, the game retains the enhanced single-player content from the console versions, but the maps and stage layouts rely heavily on assets from SSX 3. So instead of experiencing On Tour's full content offering, you're essentially playing On Tour mechanics on SSX 3 tracks. It's not necessarily a bad thing, in fact. It gives the PSP a unique identity compared to the main versions. The deep single-player progression, focus on custom characters, just layered over SSX 3's familiar track designs, so fans of the series will feel right at home. That said, the port isn't perfect. Some personal flaws for me come from the camera, as it's way too close to the character, making it easy to miss alternate paths and collectibles scattered across rails and side routes. Performing stunts also becomes tricky since it's hard to judge your distance from the ground, so imperfect landings can ruin your score in trick-based modes. The biggest issue though is the lack of a proper tutorial. Practice mode isn't really a tutorial, it's just a free-form way to test specific game modes on certain tracks. Challenges come closest, but they don't explain the correct inputs for advanced tricks or special actions. This makes the game tough for newcomers, as you're basically expected to figure things out through prior experience, trial and error, or by looking up guides. It's a shame because On Tour offers something new through a lot of customization, from characters and clothing to boards and skis, all of which affect your stats. So while the PSP version provides a fascinating alternative experience, it clearly caters more to veterans of the series. Still consideration for players who might be trying SSX for the first time, and that limits its accessibility. Still, the game itself is great. Like every SSX before it, it delivers that extreme sports thrill while staying arcadey enough for casual fun. The mix of racing and trick-based modes give it plenty of variety and depth. You just need a lot of patience to get past the grueling early experience. We've got one more futuristic racer though this time. It doesn't follow the usual anti-gravity formula. Despite how the vehicles look, this isn't an anti-gravity racer. You can't flip upside down and keep going like nothing happened. Instead, the game's main gimmick is right there in the title: stage shifting. Each car can shift into different states, granting unique abilities. The first one you unlock is Dragster State, which gives you a massive speed boost and enough screen shake to make you feel like you're playing your PSP in the middle of an earthquake. Then there's Scorch State, which despite the name, is basically a grip mode where your car sprouts fins or spoilers for tighter cornering. These are just 2 of 4 stage shift abilities you unlock as you progress through the career mode. You can't use them freely though. Each shift consumes energy from a meter that refills by collecting pickups or drifting. So tracks are designed around this system, through multiple paths for pickups, sharp corners for drift opportunities, and straights that rarely last long enough to drain your meter completely. As long as you keep drifting and collecting, the flow stays consistent. And that's good because the tracks themselves are unusual. Each race has at least 2 laps, but the tracks are built like open loops. The start and finish lines sit at dead ends, so you never pass these points twice. Even more interesting, the track layout changes between laps. Corners and paths that were blocked before suddenly open up, almost like the track itself is state shifting. It's a clever choice that ties the game's mechanics and world together beautifully. Unfortunately, progression is where things get messy. There are 3 playable characters, but each has a completely separate progression. Unlocking new stage shift abilities for one character doesn't carry over to the others, and switching resets your career entirely. So if you want 100% completion, you'll have to replay the entire campaign 3 times. Even though all characters share the same abilities and nearly identical cars, there's no difference in stats, just slight visual variations to keep the shifting animations consistent. It's baffling, especially since the 3rd character is locked behind career progression. My guess, they probably planned for unique abilities per character but ran out of time before launch. The repetition competition can wear you down, and while challenges help mix things up, they require a lot of progress to unlock first. Still, the core mechanics are genuinely impressive. Mastering the stage shifting feels great once you get the rhythm down. It's weird to recommend this game. Like, what do you even tell people? It's not an anti-gravity racer like most futuristic racers, and it's not exactly your average racer but set in the future. Yet Stage Shift earns the praise. It's a brilliant, overlooked experiment that's far more creative than it first appears. Now this next game is a little strange. I played it a while back after stumbling across it as one of those random obscure racers, and it still stands out as something genuinely unique. Luckily, the PSP port isn't all that different from the PS2 version I played, though the title did go through a change, from 187 Ride or Die to Street Riders for some reason. It's basically what old school Ubisoft was capable of back then, creating a surprisingly entertaining experience, even if it came with a heavy dose of stereotypical gangsta flair. The story follows Buck, a member of the Pre's gang locked in a turf war with Cortez and his crew. Each chapter is drenched in gangsta slang and over-the-top attitude. Despite Buck being the star of the cutscenes, you don't just play as him. He's one half of a duo. The other half is your gunman, usually this bombshell lady unless you swap her out for another homie. Every team on the track works the same way. One driver, one shooter. Opponents even have visible aiming lines so you can dodge incoming fire. You start with a basic handgun, but you can pick up or steal better weapons by ramming into enemies. Balancing is a bit messy though. Auto-firing weapons like the AK or Uzi dominate every situation, while shotguns are great but way better at close range. The semi-auto pistols and the Desert Eagle are decent backups, and there are special items like health packs, mines, molotovs, and arena-exclusive weapons like the auto shotgun and minigun. And then there's this beauty. Hidden in certain shortcuts, it's a perfect reward for taking slower routes. Track design actually accounts for this, offering multiple paths and risk-reward choices. Event types range from standard circuit and eliminator races to checkpoint time trials, and my favorite one, and probably any Bosnian's favorite mode, the minefield, where every pickup is replaced with explosives. Combat modes include Deathmatch, Team Deathmatch, Gang Fight, Survivor, Domination, and extras like the Escort and Chase. They're simple but fun, mixing racing with chaotic gang warfare in a way that somehow works. Winning events unlocks new cars with better stats, split into 3 categories, but there's another neat system. Your performance earns bullet medals based on time and kill count. These medals aren't just for bragging rights or 100% completion, they actually grant buffs for future events, creating a satisfying snowball effect for skilled players. That said, I still prefer the PS2 version. The PSP does a good job at adapting the controls to fewer buttons, but the console version just feels smoother and more convenient today. If you're revisiting it now, emulating the PS2 version is probably the way to go, unless you really want the handheld experience. Overall, Street Riders is pure over-the-top fun, a wild mix of racing and gunfights wrapped in Ubisoft's exaggerated take on American gang culture. It's rough around the edges, sure, but it's fast, stylish, and surprisingly well-paced. A perfect reminder of when Ubisoft wasn't afraid to get weird and cool at the same time. Genki's attempt to bring Tokyo Extreme Racer to handheld consoles was pretty out of pocket. It almost feels like an experiment for future projects. Because the game changed publishers, the name had to change too. So instead of Tokyo Extreme Racer, we got Street Supremacy. It's weird, I know, but back then TXR name was licensed under Crave, so Genki had to roll with something new. The core gameplay itself is classic Genki, a full campaign across the C1 Highway, Wangan Yokohama, and Yokohama sections, all staples of the series. But being on the PSP meant a few compromises. With fewer buttons and limited hardware compared to the PS2, Genki decided to remove overworld driving entirely. Instead, you challenge opponents through a map menu, which actually ties nicely into the game's main gimmick, crew-based progression. Unlike most TXR titles where you're a lone wanderer crushing dreams one race at a time, here you start as part of a crew. You interact with the leader, help take down rival teams, and slowly claim territories along the highway while earning cash and reputation. Sometimes you'll be called into attack or defense battles, where each crew sends out 5 members including you to fight for control. You can stick with your crew and finish the game that way, but if you want to unlock more mechanics, you'll need to climb the ranks. That means challenging your own teammates one by one until the leader becomes available, letting you take over the crew yourself. As leader, you decide which areas to attack, manage defenses, and even choose which members to deploy. Recruiting wanderers becomes crucial here as they're often the best drivers with unique cars. It's honestly honestly one of the most unique Tokyo Extreme Racer spin-offs ever made. The crew system adds a layer of strategy and progression that never appeared again in the series. If you're a TXR fan looking for something familiar yet fresh, this is absolutely worth checking out. The only downside is that once you become a crew leader, the game leans more into management than racing. It's brief enough not to drag, but it does slow the pace a little. Still, where else can you race alongside the Devil Z as your teammate? Big waves, extreme surfing, a lot of penguins, and a chicken. Yes, this definitely sounds like Surf's Up, one of those animated movies that tried to put a twist on the classic underdog story by framing it as a mockumentary, mainly a parody of sports documentaries, with the story centered around competitive surfing. I had a hard time imagining how that would translate into a racing game, but I guess this is one of those answers. The game keeps the movie's tone, complete with lore dumps through fake ESPN-style broadcasts and interviews. Gameplay-wise though, it's a total hodgepodge, like someone duct-taped several genres together and hope for the best. The shoulder buttons act like air brakes, straight out of an anti-gravity racer. Ramps and rails let you perform QTE tricks and grinds like a skateboard or snowboard game. And then there are power-ups, because apparently it's also a kart racer now. One original mechanic is the startup phase. You actually have to paddle to gain speed before catching the wave. It's basically the game's version of an acceleration stat, and depending on your character and board, you might need to mash the circle button longer. The stat affects how fast you start and how quickly you recover when power-ups knock you around. In a way, this game has a lot of similar design choices as Sonic Riders, another hoverboard-based racing game. They're not one-to-one, but if you've played both, the shared ideas are identifiable. As for unlocks, they are handled through the cup system, where you earn new characters, boards, and tracks, but the structure is just as odd as the gameplay. Every time you hit a ramp, you get randomized QTE to perform tricks. Succeed and you get a small speed boost. The problem is, these QTEs are completely inconsistent. Sometimes it's just 2 buttons, sometimes up to 4, and it doesn't seem tied to airtime, ramp size, or placement. Even ramps that lead directly into grind rails can throw long QTEs you can't realistically finish. This probably answers why there's no penalty for failing them, otherwise it'd be a disaster. There are also glowing light orbs that trigger a super boost mode, but for some reason they require another long QTE to activate. Cup progression is equally strange. Each cup has a total of 4 events, 3 circuit races, and only the top 4 racers advance to a final knockout round. Placement is determined by a total scoring system that factors in tricks, clams collected, and power-up hits, not just finishing position. It's a neat idea, but the scaling makes it mostly irrelevant. The score gap between finishing place is way too wide for everything else to fill. Power-ups can be fired forwards or backwards, but most are clearly designed for one direction, making half of them useless. Out of curiosity, I checked the PS2 version and it's different. Not exactly a racing game, but a lot closer to Tony Hawk's Pro Skater with tricks and scores at its core. So the PSP port is certainly unique in that respect. It's way more of a racing game, but it still feels like a less competent version of Sonic Riders. Overall, Surf's Up on PSP is fine. It's average, playable, and occasionally fun, but nothing special. It falls squarely into that category of games we've seen plenty of times already. Ambitious in concept, messy in execution. It might sound crazy, but the PSP was also home to a Test Drive Unlimited game. I've already covered this in my Test Drive franchise analysis, but for anyone unaware, this version is based on the PS2 port developed by Atari Melbourne House, not the main PC or Xbox 360 release most people know. Because of that, online features were limited, and the more immersive options like interior camera or window toggling were removed for obvious reasons. But that doesn't make the port any less impressive. It still retains the 1:1 map scale from the main versions, complete with most dealerships and houses. Just like the PS2 version though, the social features are gone, so no character selection, no clothing customization, no achievement system, and simplified handling. In exchange, the PSP version adds more single-player progression to fill the gap. The biggest addition is the club system, where each club demands specific cars to participate, based on nationality, manufacturer, or performance class. You climb the ranks by challenging club members one by one, with difficulty ramping up as you go. It's a clever way to encourage exploration across the massive map, which impressively still allows full off-road driving just like the original. The design gives players more reasons to roam around the island beyond dealerships and tuning shops. Other quirks include police chases, which are much easier to evade in here, and a smaller car roster, meaning you'll see repeats across clubs. To balance that, the game offers plenty of prize cars and introduces master points, earned simply by driving around the island. It might look stripped down compared to the console versions and run at a lower frame rate, but the fact that this game even runs on the PSP with its full map intact and extra single-player content is genuinely impressive. Here's another top-down racer, a simpler one to experience that I kinda thought this was a PSP Minis title at first, but surprisingly it's not. It's so simple that there's no progression beyond the challenges tab. This takes us through a linear path of variety game modes. A lot of them are racing with deathmatch rules. Anyone left behind gets eliminated, and scores will be tallied when only one remains. Whoever reaches the score requirement wins the event. Depending on the event, this will switch up the mode with modifiers like no damaging pickups, time trials around while avoiding cones, modes where dead cars can still cause chaos as a ghost, coin collecting, cactus smashing, and etc. The variety in game modes can't go quite far here, although pacing goes up and down semi-regularly. Despite also featuring a dynamic camera system though, I'm actually surprised to not struggle as much as I did with Micro Machines. That extra grip the car seems to have really helped with orientation, and the fact that there's way less extreme verticality with this game's map design probably plays a major part. Can't miss a jump and die if there's not that many of them to begin with after all. There's no stats for the car selection here, so it's purely cosmetic. So the only other thing to really mention is the power-ups, and from what I've seen so far, they're pretty creative all around. The non-lethal items can be pretty powerful when used in the correct places, like the fog machine is an instant nuisance, the oil slick can make you suffer past tight corners, and the plunger, absolute menace. The lethal pickups are also balanced to be quite weak, at least so they don't just kill in quick succession or one tap. This way there's always a chance to dodge and fight back even when it seems unlikely. After all, getting destroyed is also an instant loss for the round. Clear enough events to unlock more tracks and car models. Then that's pretty much it. Like I said, this game is surprisingly simple that I thought it was a PSP mini title. The core mechanics are mostly fine and weapons are balanced nice enough to not be frustrating. So you know what, if I have to don my reviewer hat, I'd probably give this game a 6 or a 7 out of 10. There's not that much hook in it, but the core of it is better than a lot of racing games on the platform. Before Codemasters unveiled the Grid series, there was Toka. Its predecessor built around different philosophy. Even as a mid-2000s simcade, Toka stood out for featuring a proper storyline in its race driver releases. Unfortunately, only the second and third entries made it to the PSP, so we'll have to skip the legend of Ryan McCain. Just like the main versions, we play as an up-and-coming racer, guided by our manager and sponsors, working as a driver for hire across multiple teams. It's a clever excuse to experience a huge range of cars and disciplines without being locked into one category for too long. Each championship has a payout goal based on finishing positions. If you fall short, you can rewind to earlier events and redo them to improve your total. That'll happen often on PSP, mostly because of the handling changes. Driving with face buttons instead of analog triggers makes throttle control tricky, and spinning out can get frustrating. Thankfully, the AI is nerfed compared to the PC version, so you can still recover and win assuming the spin doesn't happen on the final lap, which becomes a real problem on tracks with heavy elevation like Mount Panorama or Laguna Seca. So basically, the story itself is linear, spanning 8 seasons as you climb from rookie to champion. Along the way, you choose which races and teams to join, determining the car classes and tracks you'll tackle. There's no economy system, despite the goals revolving around payouts. We don't really own any of the cars directly since we're just jumping between teams and race league. To that end, the variety is incredible, and the fact that Codemasters managed to fit all of that onto the PSP, complete with a limited damage system, is surreal. Handling differences between cars are noticeable, especially given the control limitations, but the sheer content makes up for it. As you progress, you'll unlock cutscenes that highlight relationships between characters, your manager, rivals, and friends, all reacting to your rise through the ranks.
Nice to meet you.
Hey, cabron, you want to shift your ass?
Cesar Marquez.
Those days just standing there like a stunned mullet, mate. I reckon you got more chance of Miss Hawaii over here.
These moments are surprisingly entertaining, full of personality and tension that make the career mode feel alive. Is it worth playing this version of the PC release? Probably not, but even so, it's a standout among PSP racing games, ambitious, content-rich, and entertaining. The only real drawback is availability. The PSP port was PAL only, missing a North American release, which means framerate can get choppy unless you tweak emulation settings. A year later though, an enhanced port of TOCA Race Driver 2 finally arrived in North America, under the name Race Driver 2006. Most of the core gameplay mechanics remain identical to the previous release, so there's not much new to describe beyond what I've already covered, but this version does include a few major additions that defines it as the definitive edition. First, there's a brand new exclusive mode called Trans World Cup, which doesn't even exist in the PC version. It's a map-based progression mode featuring short, focused challenges like time trials and specific skill sets. A nice change of pace from the usual championship grind. Second, the game adds 10 new tracks and 16 additional vehicles, bringing the total to around 60 circuits and 50 cars overall. And third, the multiplayer has been expanded. Previously limited to ad hoc play, this version finally supports online connectivity, letting players race directly against others or share leaderboard results. Since this is the NTSC release, performance is noticeably smoother than the PAL version. The improved framerate helps iron out some of the rough edges from before. Otherwise, the base career structure remains the same, but these additions make the experience feel more complete. In short, Race Driver 2006 is the definitive PSP edition of TOCA Race Driver 2. It's everything the PAL version offered, plus exclusive content, better performance, and proper online play. If you're planning to revisit this era of Codemasters racing, this is absolutely the version to grab. A follow-up soon arrived, but there's a catch. Unlike TOCA Race Driver 2, this port only carries over the new car and track roster from its main versions. The World Tour storyline, the heart of the main game, is completely gone, replaced by a challenge-style progression system. So if you were hoping for more entertaining characters and driver interactions, you can forget about it. This version is pure racing, and to make matters worse, the campaign is basically just the Trans World Cup from Race Driver 2006 all over again. Normally, I wouldn't consider it as a bad thing, but we need to remember, Trans World Cup was an extra content added into the NA port of TOCA Race Driver 2. It wasn't meant to be the main content in the first place, and the way they implemented this in this port makes the experience a lot rougher, due to its way more linear nature than how it was originally designed. Driving physics, handling, and other sim-like features are still based on TOCA Race Driver 2, so both games feel nearly identical. That puts Race Driver 3 Challenge in a weird spot. It offers a different experience from the main version, but ends up feeling like a step backwards, while still serving as a direct follow-up for fans of Race Driver 2006. So if you ever wanted more Trans World Cup, this game delivers exactly that. But if you're looking for something closer to the full TOCA Race Driver 3 experience with its story and character depth, you won't find it here. Being a Sony console in the 2000s, the PSP wouldn't be complete without its iconic anti-gravity racing franchise, Wipeout. The series dates back to 1995 as a PlayStation 1 launch title, and in that sense, Wipeout Pure serves as both the PSP's launch racer and the series' 10th anniversary celebration. Set in the FX300 Racing League in the year 2197, roughly a century after Wipeout 2097, this entry was designed as a clean slate. The name Pure was chosen deliberately to strip away the excess gimmicks and complexity of Wipeout Fusion, returning to the series' roots while embracing modern design sensibilities. The pit stop mechanic from Fusion was replaced with a sacrifice mechanic, letting players burn their power-ups for emergency shields, a smart trade-off between offense and defense that adds tactical depth. Progression is divided into speed classes, following the traditional Wipeout difficulty curve, at the lowest tier Vector being the slowest tier for learning track layout and getting used to the handling model, then ramping up to Venom, Flash, Rapier, and Phantom as the fastest, reaching over 1,000 kilometers an hour. Each class features Alpha, Beta, and Ascension championships. Ascension combines all 8 tracks from the previous cups into one marathon, though it can feel a bit drawn out. As speeds climb, opponents use power-ups more aggressively, turning high-tier races into chaotic slugfests where a single hit can ruin your run. That's where strategy kicks in. You'll constantly decide whether to use, save, or sacrifice items for shields while threading through hairpins at breakneck speed. The skill gap is massive, Pure doesn't hold back, and it's quick to throw players into the deep end. Ship selection also plays a big role, with each brand specializing in different stats, high handling and shields at the cost of speed, or blistering velocity with fragile armor. Veterans of the series will recognize familiar teams and know exactly which one fits their style. Mechanically, Pure simplifies fusion system to lower the entry barrier while keeping the racing sharp and responsive. It also introduces Zone Mode, a minimalist endurance challenge with no opponents, no items, and no brakes. Just you, your ship, and ever-increasing speed. It's the ultimate test of track knowledge and reflexes, pushing players to reach zone level 10 and beyond. The game is generally considered to be a good return to form, but the game was also known for its expansive DLC content, being the very first PSP title to support additional content through extra ships, skins, and tracks. Availability is rather bizarre though, since they have some really weird exclusivity to Japan, US, or Europe. Some are available on all three, while others only in specific regions. If Pure was meant to take the series back to basics, Pulse was the attempt to bring complexity back, but still under the refined design philosophy Pure established. In a way, it feels like the developers wanted to push the PSP to its absolute limit, introducing deeper structural changes and more advanced physics that clearly separated from its predecessor. Instead of the simple linear tournament progression, Pulse introduces a grid-based race campaign. Each grid is interconnected, with individual events represented by hexes. Earning medals awards points that unlocks adjacent nodes, letting you choose your own path through the campaign. It's a smart evolution, less repetitive, more flexible, and tailored to your preferred playstyle. Some classic modes return too, like Eliminator from Wipeout 3, though here it's focused entirely on destruction. This time there's also track lore, short narrations before races that flesh out the Wipeout universe for longtime fans. Everything else feels like a refinement of Pure systems, but with more polish and ambition. There are trade-offs though. Speed classes are now tied to specific grid events, meaning progression can feel uneven. Sometimes you'll slow down after a fast race or suddenly jump into a blistering one. Loyalty points have also been added for each ship brand, earned through perfect laps and strong performances, though they mostly unlock alternate skins rather than gameplay perks. Just like Pure, Pulse received DLC packs featuring new ships, tracks, and even an extra campaign grid. All of that content was later bundled into the PS2 port 2 years afterwards. It's probably no surprise that both Wipeout titles on PSP are superb. Pure is simpler and can feel repetitive, but it was meant to establish a clean foundation for the series moving forwards. Pulse builds on that perfectly based on the feedback, resulting in smoother handling, smarter progression, and a campaign system that lets players decide how long their journey lasts. Even small tweaks like clearer pickup icons is a minor but appreciative change. So while both are worth playing, Pulse is the one I'd recommend more. It's Wipeout at its most refined on handheld. The rally genre wouldn't be complete without a WRC title somewhere, and in 2005, it finally arrived on the PSP. Unlike most rally games made or endorsed by individual drivers, this one feels more like a design by committee project, and that really shows in the gameplay. Progression is handled through the championship mode, splitting 4 races per region into bundled events. One neat feature here is the AI ghost system, which shows your opponent's ghosts on the track as a visual representation of their times. A nice touch that gives you a better sense of pace beyond just numbers on screen. Unfortunately, that's where the praise ends. The game is extremely scuffed. Having played other PSP rally titles before this, the difference in handling is night and day, and not in a good way. Trying to describe it in words is tough, but imagine driving on wheels made of soap. No matter what terrain you're on or how sharply you turn, the car just keeps sliding in the same direction. It's infuriating, especially once tougher corners start showing up. That broken handling drags down the entire experience. So honestly, I wouldn't recommend this one over any of the other rally games I've covered. It's too basic, bizarre, and not worth the frustration. Instead of ending this video with a bad game, I wanted to close things out with something special. One of the most fascinating PSP titles by source material alone. Developed by a familiar studio with deep roots in Japanese highway racing, this is Wangan Midnight Portable. If you're somehow unfamiliar, Wangan Midnight is a manga series that ran from the 1990s to 2008. It's best known for its 2 legendary cars, the Devil Z, a heavily modified Nissan Fairlady Z, and the Blackbird, a pitch-black rough-tuned Porsche, locked in high-speed duels across Tokyo's highways. The manga's popularity exploded thanks to its arcade adaptation, and since this video is all about PSP racing games, you can probably guess where this is going. Genki's entire Tokyo Extreme Racers series was inspired by Wangan Midnight, so seeing them finally adapt the manga directly is poetic. Despite the similarities, Genki approached this game differently. There's a scenario mode that condenses the manga's storyline, a short arcade mode for quick TXR-style battles, and a tuning mode for building custom cars plus a few extras to mess around with. The scenario mode features 12 stages covering key story beats. It's all in Japanese, so while I know the general outline, don't ask me for details. For most of it, you drive the Devil Z from Akio's perspective, though there are brief switches to Tatsuya and Reina, letting you pilot the Blackbird, RX-7FC, and R32. It's short but effective, giving you a glimpse of the character dynamics, though it's wild that you start with the Devil Z itself. That's like starting Tokyo Extreme Racer with Jintei's Emperor, a car that easily hits 300 km an hour, throwing you straight into endgame handling from the start. Arcade mode plays like a compact TXR experience, 8 races following SP battle rules. You choose your starting points across C1, Wangan, and Yokohane, which determines your route. Opponents are mostly randomized except for mid-boss and final races. You can challenge drivers ahead or behind, and they respawn after each race. Don't expect an easy ride though. Stock cars will get destroyed quickly. Thankfully, opponents' SP damage carries over between retries, so persistence pays off. Winning unlocks special cars like the Devil Z for use in arcade mode, which sometimes causes change in scripted rival encounters. If you're struggling, tuning mode is where you should try to spend some time on. It's not a store system since there's no economy here. You pick from a handful of stock cars, which unfortunately only covers 5 Japanese brands, with a surprisingly limited roster even when compared to Street Supremacy, then run 6 test events to earn upgrade parts. Each test judges different aspects from collisions, remaining SP, top speed, and your performance determines part quality. Afterwards, you can customize body kits, colors, and performance ranks. It's simple but oddly satisfying, and if you want to change things again, you'll have to go through the same tests again for some reason. That is easier said than done though, because now the elephant in the room, handling and physics. This game is weird. It's not like any TXR title before it. It feels like Genki tried to mimic Maximum Tune's arcade handling. Cars are easier to drift but also easier to lose control with. When it works, it looks smooth and cinematic. When it doesn't, say hello to the chaotic collision physics. Traffic cars behave like they're in another dimension. Sometimes they'll just slow you down, other times the laws of physics become a suggestion. Even side bumps can ruin your run, and mixed with the twitchy handling, races often come down to whether traffic decides to ruin your life or not. Even the AI struggles with it, visibly crashing mid-race. Compared to the PS2 and PS3 versions, which play more like TXR 0 and Importuner Challenge, the PSP port sits in a strange middle ground. It's not better, but it's different enough to stand out. Despite its flaws, it's fascinating to see Genki experiment with the TXR formula in such a bold way, and to do it with Wangan Midnight of all things feels oddly fitting. And that's pretty much all of the PSP racing games that I could find. Obviously, there are likely a couple of games that I've missed out on due to many information resources either being spotty and incomplete, many undocumented Japanese exclusives, to applying the racing tag on any game that features any form of driving vehicles. Like seriously though, if I didn't curate the list, you would have seen GTA LCS and VCS in the video somewhere. Though to be fair, I really do like these games, I would have added them anyways. But there are a couple of short bits I would like to touch on as well regarding some games included in this listing, but there's a couple of reasons I have to separate them from the main collection. And that begins with PSP Minis. These are very small games that were made available to purchase and download back in 2009 by Sony. The goal of these games were to combat the early rise of mobile gaming seen with the earlier iPhone market. So most of the games added as PSP Minis were at the best very short games that are quick and simple to go through, almost akin to flash games you'd find on the internet. Besides a few titles, most of the minis are effectively made by indie studios and rarely cost above $5 per game. They're also for some reason only made available mostly for North America and Europe, with a few accessible in Japan and not a single one for the rest of Asia, while mostly being playable on the PS3 as well through backwards compatibility and sometimes the PS Vita and PS TV. Unfortunately, because of their nature, finding these games for emulation is a complete pain in the ass. Only a couple of places save a few of them, so you're likely seeing the few minis I managed to grab for this video specifically. The other thing besides minis are the backwards compatible games from the PS1 era. These are listed as PS1 classics in the PlayStation Store, but it's not as simple as just downloading and playing them immediately. After all, these games are made available through the PS3's backwards compatibility, so there are heavy limitations for the PSP. That said, the simpler arcade racers are often the best for this, which includes Crash Team Racing and Ridge Racer Type 4. From what I've seen, less than 50% of the games listed in this PS1 collection are perfectly playable on the PSP, usually being games with no second analog or R2-L2 requirements in the slightest. It was in consideration if these games should be included along, but I ultimately decided to give it a separate section for the reason that they're not really designed for the PSP, and it's up to the user to edit their inputs in the first place. Might be something to revisit sometime in the long future. The PSP to this day remains as a great innovation to the gaming industry. It's not the first handheld introduced, but it was the first to cause a massive leap from its video and audio capability compared to its competition. The limitation imposed on the console, however, from performance to usable controls, became the biggest hurdle for developers to deal with. It forced developers to rethink their approach in their attempt to adapt to the hardware, some even going to create completely unique experiences altogether. Online connectivity was still in its infancy for consoles as well, so most of the games mentioned here primarily featured ad hoc multiplayer or machine sharing for multiplayer, with only a few featuring fully fledged online connectivity. A lot of this is ultimately brought by the fact that this is a portable console, something designed to allow gaming on the go anywhere, so a lot of the games are designed to be played in shorter play sessions than normal. It sounds like a perfect match with racing games, but as we've seen here, it's not always the case. The introduction of powerful portable PCs nowadays also makes some PSP versions rather questionable, considering how easy it is to emulate main console versions at higher resolutions, although the whole RAM shortages and price hikes are not helping in that regard. That being said, this has been a blast and a very long prospect. If you managed to watch this whole video, I'm very grateful for it. Thank you very much. I believe by the time this video is out and about, this has been in the works for at least 2 to 3 months now, so any support for the video is welcome. Likes, subscribes, memberships, or even Patreon donations. They help me fund stuff like this for future projects and maybe more. We'll see what the future holds from here. Either way though, I hope you have a good day and find some really nice PSP games to try out from this video. Also, if there's any games that I've missed, you can mention in the comments below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.